This podcast is part of the Michigan Sports and Entertainment Podcast Network. Go to michigansportsandentertainment.com for more great podcasts.
You know who I can do without? I can do without the people in the video store.
Which ones?
All of them.
This is Massive Late Fee with Mike and Mark.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Massive Late Fee. My name is Mark. With me as always is my co-host Mike. How you doing, Mike?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
Good. We've got a special guest today, Nicholas Howe from the How Will I Die podcast. It's one of our newest podcasts on the Michigan Sports and Entertainment Podcast Network. We've had a lot of new podcasts come in. There's Decomposition Podcast, which is a music podcast. We have a new Twitter account at MSC Network, which is our podcast network Twitter account. So we retweet all the tweets from our different shows on our podcast network, and we promote them over there. So if you're interested in some other shows on the network, you can go to michigansportsandentertainment.com. You can go to MSC Network or at MSC Network on Twitter and check those out. Lots of good entertainment podcasts and sports podcasts as well if you're into the sports. But Nick is from the How Will I Die podcast, which is one of the most creative and interesting podcasts that we've come across in our searchings of the internet for some good podcasts to put on the network. Nick, explain to the people kind of the basis behind your podcast.
All right. Yeah. And so, like you said, I'm Nicholas. The idea behind it is a lot of people are thinking about death and kind of offhandedly talking about death. I've heard a lot of jokes about death recently, and I was like, I talk about it way too much to just be talking about it for myself. So I decided to make a podcast about it. And I was looking up ways that people have died over the last few hundred years, and some of them are just really funny. And so I decided to do a comedy storytelling set entirely in improv, and just kind of talk about the various ways that people died. But I wanted some kind of twist to it, so I decided to use myself as the catalyst for all the deaths. So it's an exploration of the multiverse of me and all the ways that I could have died in the world.
Yeah, so every episode is a different way that you could die.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting podcast, and like Nicholas said, I listened to, I think it was your last one that was sort of not based on true stories, but based on things that happened in your life.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking too about the one. There's one where a guy trips going to his mailbox and he gets impaled by a stick, and then he goes to the hospital after waiting a while. He's got this stick sticking out of him, and he dies from exsanguination while in the MRI. Exsanguination is death from blood loss, for anyone that's wondering. But that's one of my favorite words. I just love the way that word sounds.
It is a good word.
Writers are weird like that, where we just like fall in love with the sounds of different words.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm thinking the entire time, how did the doctors, because I'm thinking that this is based on a real story. So I'm thinking, well, that's a lawsuit. How did the doctors just let someone bleed to death in an MRI? And then you revealed that these were like things you were thinking of. I was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense.
And the reason that he died of blood loss was because I realized as I kept recording that I hadn't said that anyone stopped the blood. So I was like, okay, it's canon now. Nobody touched the blood. It just let it keep coming.
Yeah,
that's how he died. Sure.
It should be pointed out. Usually Nicholas does his show with a guest, and Mike and I would love to be on the show sometime.
Absolutely.
But that all this is improvised. It's not written out beforehand. It's improvised on the fly with basically just the basis of, hey, in the real life, this is kind of what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely check that out if you guys are interested. It's a very good show. I love listening to it. And another good addition to our podcast network.
I'm very excited to be there.
But we will move into the news. Some sad news. Obviously, we record these on Tuesday. These come out on Thursday, unless you're on the Patreon, and then you can get them Wednesday. But Luke Perry died after last Wednesday. He had a massive stroke. They rushed him to a Burbank hospital, and the damage was too great, so they suspended life support and all that stuff. And he ended up dying yesterday, Monday, 52 years old. And it's been a devastating one for a lot of people. I think one of the reasons that this one kind of hurts so much is because he's 52, or he was 52, which is young to die. And I don't know if he smoked. I don't know what kind of other things that he might have been doing. I know it wasn't drug related. I know like he wasn't a drug addict. Like I said, I don't know if he smoked or not. I feel like he maybe used to but quit. He wasn't a big drinker or anything like that. In very good physical shape, and just died because sometimes that just happens. And a lot of his fans that were teenagers in the 90s are closing in on that same age that he was. So I think for a lot of people, it's sort of just kind of a scary, just another like thing of mortality, another reminder of our mortality. So I think was kind of devastating for now that neither of you were either of you like big fans of 90210? Nicholas, I think you're probably a little younger, right?
I know of the show as the continuation or sequel series of 90210.
Right.
I didn't really watch the original series that had the.
What?
I wasn't really a fan.
Yeah.
I watched it at first, like I would kind of spottily catch episodes, and then there was like a big episode where like this one guy it was like almost like an issue of the week kind of show sometimes.
Yeah.
There's like this one where like this guy he like basically was written off the show, comes back for an episode and actually kills himself with a gun. Yeah, that's pretty funny. But no, I didn't really watch it that much.
Yeah. Obviously, he was more popular amongst the ladies. For younger fans now, I know he was on that show Riverdale, which I also do not watch. But I know he was popular on there. But anyway, in any case, obviously a sad loss. We also lost Ted Lindsay, the former Red Wing, number 7. I actually have his autograph. I met him one time. He was the left winger for the Detroit Red Wings through the glory days of the 1950s and early 1960s with Gordie Howe and Sid Abel, part of the production line. One of the most popular and gritty kind of NHL players that have come through this city. Like Gordie Howe had all the talent and, kind of Gordie Howe fought a lot, but sort of, a little flashier, and Ted Lindsay was kind of the get into the corners kind of guy. And obviously in Detroit, that's a very popular role, a workman-like role for fans. So that also is a heavy loss. He obviously was a little older than Luke Perry. I think he was in his late 80s, Mike, early 90s.
Yeah, I think late 80s. It could be early 90s. But yeah, he was older, so I mean, it's not as much of a surprise or shock. But all the local media have been posting, on various social media outlets their encounters with him, and nothing but like the nicest stories. He sounds like Terrible Ted was in fact a very nice person off the ice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's what when I met him, that's how it was as well. But I've only heard nice things about him. And when I met him, he was incredibly gracious, and I didn't have anything for him to sign. And he went over to this thing and he grabbed a hockey puck. And he was like, I'll sign this for you. And he grabbed this gold, one of those gold felt pens, and signed, Ted Lindsay number 7 to Mark and everything. And it was really cool. He was definitely a great guy. But yeah, another big loss there. I guess on to a little bit happier news. There's going to be a reunion, or like, it's so funny. It's another reboot thing. But now musicians are getting in on it too. Everyone is going to be rebooting themselves every, 20 years or something at some point. But Bush and Live are teaming up together to have a reunion tour of 16 Stone, which was the Bush album, and I think Throwing Copper was the name of the Live album. So they're going to go on a combined reunion tour. I think it's around 25 years, 25, 30 years.
Probably close to, I think 94 was the Bush album. So yeah, I think 94, 25 years, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so that's going to happen. Would you have any interest in seeing them in concert, Mike?
I'm hoping I get tickets. My wife is a huge fan of Bush, and everybody knows Live is my favorite band.
Yeah.
And actually, Our Lady Peace is opening for them as well, which my wife is also a huge fan of.
Oh, they are? I didn't read far enough into the article.
Yeah, she didn't either. She's like, "Oh, look, our favorite bands." And I'm like, Our Lady Peace is opening, right?
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm a huge Bush fan as well. I'm not as big of a Live fan as you are, Mike, but I'm a big fan of them as well. Right.
Yeah.
But so Nicholas, this is probably a little before your time, right? Do you know about any like Bush songs or Live songs?
I've seen a few, or I've heard a few Bush songs.
That's about as far as the as the knowledge goes on that. No.
The album 16 Stone was released when I was born, so
Okay. Yeah, I actually the other podcast that my wife and I do goes back 25 years, so we're in 1994 right now.
yeah.
But yeah, so that obviously, like I said, that's a big one for me. And it seems like I think this is a better idea with bands than it is with television and movies.
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of this because I like that when they do like a certain, my wife and I saw The Used. So they did two of their albums like one day, and then the next day they did the other one.
Mm-hmm.
I am a huge fan of the touring under one album sort of trend that's happening these days.
Yeah, and like I said, the music, it doesn't go as much out of style. I mean, for one point, it's not a reboot in the fact that it's another band. If another band, like let's say Bush dies at some point, like all the members of Bush die, 30 or 40 years from now, or they're way too old, and a new band that dresses and acts just like them starts playing their music, that I'd have more of a problem with, and I think that's more of a one-to-one correlation in some of these reboots, especially in the movies. I guess in the TV shows, it's still the same actors and actresses, but I just think the music seems to be more timeless, and going to a concert, it's an event. We can listen to these songs on the radio all we want, but going to the concert is much more of an event, and that's sort of what drives it. So yeah, I'll be looking forward to that. Mike, we should all try to get tickets together, the four of us, because I think both of our wives would really enjoy that.
Yeah, be fun. I think they come September 8th to Meadowbrook.
Yeah, my wife loves your wife. She's always telling me we got to hang out with Mike and Alex more. So we'll try to get that done. But the other thing that's going on, that's trending a lot on Twitter, is that it's been announced that Will Smith will play Richard Williams, the father of Serena and Venus Williams, in a movie about their life. And he's getting some crap about it because apparently Will Smith is not black enough to play Richard Williams. This is the most ridiculous thing in the world to me. Because, this is getting out of hand. I hate, Mike, that I hate this political correctness stuff so much. We don't talk about politics a lot on the show. I'll just say for everyone out there, so you can hate me if you want to. And if you think I'm on your side, I'm probably not as much on your side as you think. And if you think I'm against you, I'm probably not as much against you as you think. But anyway, I probably tend...
For the record, I am probably against you.
I probably tend more liberal than I do more conservative. But the political correctness, it just drives me nuts. So I think it was Eddie Redmayne when he was in that movie. I think it was I can't remember
the Danish Girl.
Yes, the Danish Girl. That was it. He got a lot of crap because he was a boy playing a transgendered person, basically. And they said, why don't you get a transgendered person to play, transgendered actor to play this role? And that comes up pretty much anytime there's someone who's transgendered that's played by someone that's not transgendered. And the argument that I always make is, that's not acting. Getting the exact person that this is not acting. That's not the art form of acting at all. Now, if you can find a very talented transgendered actor and to play the role, that's fine. But also, why would you want to pigeonhole transgendered actors into just playing transgendered people? They're also skilled actors that could play a wide range of characters. So I don't get that. Then Bryan Cranston got crap for playing someone who's not handicapped, as if you have to be handicapped to play a handicapped person. That's not what acting is. But
Gary Oldman paralyzed himself and got polio for the role of FDR coming out next year.
That's right. But this is even a step beyond, because Will Smith is black, but he's not as dark of a shade of black as Richard Williams is. Therefore, they think it's terrible casting. I don't go to the movies to see the absolute truth. If I want to know,
that's called a documentary.
Yeah, if I want to know Richard Williams' life, I'll watch a documentary or I'll read a book about his life. I go to the movies to be entertained, and it's like it's so ridiculous. It's like, okay, so we have to find an actor that looks exactly like Richard Williams. We've got to find a black actor that's just like, it's ridiculous to me. I don't understand it. It's so stupid.
To be fair for his role in the Muhammad Ali biopic, Will Smith did knock out an elderly Joe Frazier.
I mean, he had to.
Oh my god! But yeah, it's just this kind of. I mean, Nicholas, what's your take on stuff like this, where they complain about actors who aren't exactly what their characters are?
I think everyone wants to complain about everything, honestly. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of millennial thinking, so sorry, but there are some things that I see are wrong, and like they feel wrong and they are wrong. But with stuff like with the Danish Girl with Eddie Redmayne, that was more appropriate than having a male to female trans person playing that character, because they are in the middle of the transition for the movie, for the Danish Girl. Mm-hmm. So it would be a little bit worse to specifically cast someone who identifies as a woman and then have them go back to being like their male previous self for the movie. That doesn't really jive well. And as far as Will Smith not being black enough, that's horse. I definitely think that Will Smith's name being attached to this movie is definitely something that benefits the movie more than any other actor, pretty much, because Will Smith is a big name. People are going to come see this Will Smith movie.
Yeah.
But I don't know enough about the Williams family to be like, oh, he's not going to do good at it and he's just not black enough, because that's bullshit, honestly.
Yep.
He's perfectly black enough to be a black man in a movie.
He can definitely play a black man.
Yeah. I just don't understand why he has to look exactly like Richard Williams. And you're not gonna find someone that looks like exactly like Richard Williams that's a big enough star to carry this film.
Exactly.
It's just not possible.
If there's any concern that I would have about this movie, is I don't think Will Smith would even have the slightest idea what it would be like to be the parent of two talented children.
That's true. That's going to be a stretch for him. But that's
no. Act like Serena really is good at tennis. You're not just saying this.
But that's why they call it acting. He's gonna have to act like it. But yeah, no, I mean, like Nicholas, I don't want you to get me wrong. There, like, if someone says something racist or stuff like, I mean, I have lied, but I don't consider that political correctness. Like, I think about, like, the example that I always use is when Carrie Fisher died. Steve Martin tweeted out that. I'll paraphrase it because I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something like, the first time that I laid eyes on Carrie Fisher, she was the most gorgeous creature I had ever seen. I soon found out that she was smart, talented, and funny as well, because they were good friends. And everyone shamed him so badly for commenting on her looks that he had to remove the tweet. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. It's like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, like, that overtness is wild to me. God.
Yeah, it goes too far sometimes.
Yeah. People gotta have their opinions heard, 100%.
Right. But I don't think we should go back to Breakfast at Tiffany's with Mickey Rooney playing a Chinese, because that's horrible and offensive.
Yeah,
that's the good part of political correctness, that we got away from that stuff. But like, people.
Not really. I mean, in what was it? The Doctor Strange movie. Tilda Swinton plays the ancient one.
That's true. Yeah. That was.
You didn't even see that one coming, did you, Mark?
That's true. I guess. And Emma Stone played that. What was it, in Hawaii or something like that? She played an Asian American. Aloha. That's what it's called, right? Yeah.
Or Scarlett Scarlett Johansson, or one of them played the main character in what's that movie?
The Ghost something.
Yeah, Ghost in the Shell. That's it.
Yeah.
It's an anime. They had to have a white character replace her. That doesn't seem like we've changed that much. I mean, you're not doing the same impressions, thankfully. But...
Right. One time I heard Ridley Scott. I think it was Ridley Scott. I don't want to slander anyone, so I'm just going to say, I'm not sure, but I think...
You could say Tony Scott. He's no longer amongst us, so he's not going to do anything.
That's true. Tony Scott one time said that bridges are... No, I'm just joking. But no, I think it was Ridley Scott, and he said that something like, I can't put a guy named Mohammed as the lead in my movie because there are no Mohammeds that move the box office numbers, or something like that. Basically, he was saying that there aren't famous Muslim American actors or just Muslim actors that he could put in a film that would be a big star that would attract people. I would argue that I don't think star power really has as much to do with how much money a movie makes anymore than it used to.
Yeah.
See, what I don't understand is why they pay actors so much to be in movies. Everybody wants to be in the movie. You don't have to pay them even a fraction of what they actually make to be in the movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
honestly. I just feel like, this pays $50,000. If you want to be in it, you're in it. If you're not, we'll find someone else.
That's a good point, Mike, because, and some people will argue, well, yeah, but they wouldn't be as good. But I will contend that for every, Sandra Bullock, there are probably 1,000. I mean, that might be 1,000 might be an overstatement, but there are many, 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 probably in the thousands of talented actors and actresses that don't ever really break through, that are as talented as the famous ones that we know, but just for luck or timing or whatever, they don't really break through like some of the other ones do. And I think even actors would say that there are other people as talented as them that just didn't get the break.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a British actor, comedian, David Mitchell, who said, I don't deserve fame, but thanks to a certain me being in a certain place at a certain time, and the words.
It's okay.
Being in a certain place at a certain time, and the demographics of the population, I get to be the most famous person in the room.
Right. Yeah, that is kind of how it works out. I mean, you have to have talent. not just. I mean, I don't know. I have a hard time judging
I would say that's pressing it a bit.
right. But I have a hard time judging what's good acting and what's bad acting. But I will say it does take talent to be an actor or a director or a writer or whatever. But there are plenty of people that have, just as much talent that don't ever make it through. So yeah, I agree with you, Mike. There's a lot of competition. They should be. They're
ripping these people off left and right. That's what I do.
Exactly. Oh man. Yeah, I would just go in and underbid them.
Yeah, that's all. Eventually, everyone's just making scale.
Yeah.
So I do performances a lot. I would be perfectly fine if I made $50,000 on a movie.
There you go.
Yeah, see? And I mean, what a movie is 3 months' work. Samuel Jackson is probably still making millions of dollars a year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, let's go back to let's just have the studios in charge of everything like it used to be.
Maybe just do nothing but a net split, because I hear they're actually working on getting the accounting to be a little more transparent. If the accounting were transparent and you could give everyone a net percentage of the movie, I mean, that would probably be the most fair way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue. I mean, even 1% of Schindler's List is still quite a bit of money.
That's true.
I mean, Schindler's List, you probably could have replaced every actor in that. I mean, obviously Ray Fiennes and which one is it? Liam Neeson?
Yeah.
Or maybe they should have played the other role at this point. Just kidding. I mean, you could have put Alan Rickman in there for either of them. It would have been equally good. You could have put basically anyone, and that's not to say they're not great actors, but like you said, there's a dearth, not a dearth, there's a plethora of talented, actors that I just don't understand why you keep paying them more money. It's not like they're not going to be in the movie if you don't offer them any more than they were in the last movie.
Exactly. Oh, but I guess that's the way that this industry that we try to cover works. But anyway, so now what we're watching this week, I have been watching a lot of Saturday Night Live because that's what we're talking about. I also have been watching a little bit more of St. Elsewhere. And what was the other thing that my wife and I caught? Oh, we watched that movie, The Neighbor, or not movie, the TV show, I think it's called The Neighbors or My Neighbor. It's the one with the guy from New Girl and Cedric.
I don't know anything what you're talking about.
And Cedric the Entertainer. Yeah, it's Cedric the Entertainer and the guy.
Cedric the Entertainer is, of course, an ironic nickname.
Yes, we watched the first episode. I don't recommend the show. It was pretty terrible.
You lost me at Cedric the Entertainer.
They Hollywood lost Cedric the Entertainer.
Honestly,
but they play and it's the girl from it's this thing too. I think New Girl's funny at times. I think it's kind of dumb at times too. But I think it's pretty. It gets to almost hilarious at certain times. But the girl that's in it, the one that plays his wife, is from Two Broke Girls, which is a terrible show. But so they move into a black neighborhood, and Cedric the Entertainer thinks that they're trying to be all nice and everything, like we're not racist and stuff, and he's acting like a jerk to them on purpose because he wants to point out that it's just a cover, that they could be racist and they're just pretending to be nice, because no one in their right mind would be nice to him being as much of a jerk as he is. So I don't know. It's weird, and it sounds like a better social commentary when I explain it, but it's really just a terrible comedy.
I'm sorry. I saw the trailer for it, and I was shocked that it was going on. So,
do you think Satan ever regrets signing that contract with Cedric the Entertainer?
That's the one that he's trying to get out of.
Come on.
He's looking for
You can live forever. Just stop doing shows.
Nick, what have you been watching?
Recently I've been into some geek stuff. Umbrella Academy came out not too long ago, and everyone is talking about it. I just started watching it. It's pretty solid. And then also on the DC Universe app, they're showing Doom Patrol, and the first few episodes of that, I think they are releasing number 3, or number 3 just came out last week. Pretty good. I was surprised that in 2019 I saw a Brendan Fraser sex scene in real life, but it's actually a pretty solid TV show, and that's the best thing that I can say about it, is that it's a pretty solid show.
I've seen a Brendan Fraser sex scene, but it wasn't on film. That was back in the 90s. That's our secret, Brendan. No, but yeah, I've heard about the Umbrella Academy. I don't know much about it, what it's based on or anything like that. Netflix keeps trying to make me watch it. Yes. Eventually I'll probably tune into it to see what it's all about. But is it comic book based?
Yeah, so the Umbrella Academy is based on a comic book that the lead singer of My Chemical Romance, Gerard Way, he wrote a comic book in 2003 or 2004. And it was like big on the indie scene for comic books. But it wasn't really super big until the last 3 years. It suddenly got like really popular, and Gerard Way, who's the singer, he started writing more for like DC and his own comics company. Yeah.
Didn't he actually work on Doom Patrol as well at one point?
Yes, he did. He wrote the most recent version of Doom Patrol.
I had read that years ago. I knew he was, before he started the band, he was trying to work, or was working as an artist for comic books.
Yep.
So,
and his art is pretty solid.
That's cool. Mike, what have you been watching?
I've pretty much been watching the same stuff. A lot of the hot ones, watching some older episodes. Love the show. Frankenstein's Lab, I've been watching a lot of that. And then just watching a lot of Joe Rogan clips. He's had a lot of good guests recently. Been watching some of Your Mom's House, which is another podcast with comedians Tom Segura and Christina Pazinski. Just, that kind of stuff.
Sounded like a joke when you started it.
Yeah.
I've been watching Your Mom's House.
Yeah, I don't know why they call it that. It's just a weird title, but it's a really fun show to watch. Like, if you watch, it pays off the more you watch it. There's a lot of inside jokes and stuff. It's just really entertaining.
Kind of like this podcast and how we hate the Scandinavians.
I agree with that.
All right, we are joined here with another up-and-coming actor, very hot young talent named Eric James Morris. You've seen him on MacGyver. You can see him in the upcoming movie next month, Pageant Material. How you doing, Eric? It's good to have you here.
Hey, man, I'm doing great. How about you?
Good. Things are going well here at Massive Late Fee. I know you live in the Atlanta area. Did you grow up there?
I did. I'm actually born and raised. I'm one of the few actors that can actually say that in this town. I meet so many people that's moved here from other areas. There's not very many of us native Atlanteans.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly how it started. I know the Walking Dead films in Georgia, and it used to be that if you wanted to get serious in the acting world, if you wanted to go the stage route, you went to New York. If you wanted to go the film and television route, you went to California. But more and more, Atlanta is becoming a hotbed of the entertainment industry, and there's a lot of projects there. What's it like to be kind of in the center of all that?
It's kind of cool to see how Atlanta's changed over the years. Like you just said, a lot of people would go out west typically to chase film and that kind of thing. But Atlanta, they had some pretty heavy tax credits to promote filmmakers to want to film here. So that had a lot to do with the film industry wanting to come to Atlanta. So every year it's gotten more and more. It's grown a lot, and it's neat being here with all these shows being filmed locally and people moving here from all over the country that want to be entertainers, and I meet people from all over when I'm on set. And it's pretty cool.
Now, do you find that provides more opportunity for your career, or is it more competition and harder to get into things?
Right now, it's a good benefit for actors that want to get in the industry. Atlanta's a little bit of a different market. It's cheaper to live here than it is in LA or New York. Mm-hmm. But the productions are there's a lot going on here. A lot of professional productions, and a lot of non-union, independent, small films too. So there's a lot of opportunity to get into the film. So it is a benefit. However, with all the talent from the West Coast and some other people from up in New York that come here, and I've heard this many times over, that some of these guys from LA, they moved to Atlanta and they've gotten 10 times more auditions than they ever would have got in a year's time out in Los Angeles, because the competition out there is really stiff and it's so saturated. The market is, everybody wants, a lot of people think they want to be an actor, and it really saturates the market. It makes it tough, and it's a tough industry in general. But overall, to answer your question, I'd say, yeah, it's a good place to be if you're trying to get in the industry. It's a great town to start, and if a production takes you out of town, which sometimes that happens, and that's great.
Now, one of the first big things that you booked was a spot on an episode of MacGyver, the reboot TV series. What was it like filming that and working in that kind of an environment?
It's a great environment. When you're working on a big set like that with a lot of money and a lot of heavy talent involved, things run a lot smoother. They're well sorted. The shot list is way calculated. There's several cameras going at once. You have some very, very professional directors that will direct certain episodes of the series. Sometimes they come and go. Sometimes they'll keep the same director for many episodes. Sometimes it's just one. It just depends. So it's cool to be on those sets. It's a very professional environment, like I say. And I had a great time working with those guys, and I would love to do it again. And it's a lot different, but it has a lot of the same similarities as if you're working with somebody that's going to film school. There's just one camera and a couple of guys with some microphones. I mean, so you have the same scenario, but just on a lot larger scale with a lot more money. But you really have the same kind of issues about lighting and, of course, your sound and shot angles and how to work all that stuff out in a short period of time and get it done in a decent amount of time. And those productions like that, they have all that stuff pretty well figured out. And they have to, because there's so much money on the line. Every minute costs a fortune if you spend more time than you think you're going to.
As an actor, which between independent productions and larger commercial productions, which do you think you learn more as an actor on?
That's a good question. Well, to see how a set should run, like if you've never done acting at all and you want to get into it, go be a background extra and get on some of the big productions and see how they operate and get to know who's who and whose job is what and what they actually do, and watch how they work. That will help you a lot. But as an actor, you're trying to actually act, not just as a background talent. I'd say it's just the opposite. It's better to get started on small, non-union little projects and get your feet wet and get comfortable with cameras in your face and, and all that good stuff, and trying to interact with another person that you've never met, you've never even said hello to, and you're looking at them in the eye, and you're supposed to look at them with emotion and say whatever you need to say or do whatever you're supposed to do to make it seem realistic. And when you walk into a professional set, that's not even a part of the equation. You're supposed to have that, before you even step foot in set. So yeah, it's better to learn to act on smaller stuff, and then when you're ready to make the jump into some bigger productions, then you're ready. You can do what they want you to do. It's no problem.
Now, would you say that you learn more as an actor going to acting school, or would you say that you'd learn more getting your feet wet and actually doing different roles?
You definitely need some training. Well, you really need acting classes. If somebody wants to get in the industry and they think they can be an actor, because it looks so easy on TV, right? So everybody thinks they can do it, and then you realize it is not easy. It is very difficult, and it's just not. It's a learned. Everybody knows how to act in general, because we all grew up how to tell stories or tell lies, because sometimes you have to. It saves your life. So it can, it's just natural. Right. So as an actor, but to be able to do it and do it with intentions of other than just to perform as someone else, and do it in front of people and do it with strangers that you've never met, it does take training. And acting, that the class environment is the best place for that, where you can get on a stage with your other classmates and do scene study and put on performances with the audience and get used to people looking at you and critiquing you for what you're doing. It helps tremendously. I mean, and then of course, the more you do it, when you actually start working on productions and working with strangers, and the easier it gets. It's like repetition. But I mean, from day one to where I'm at today, it's very different from how I felt back then to how I feel about it now. Just because I've been doing it for a while, but it's still a great thing. I love it. It's nothing. I love the feeling. It's a great rush. It's a great experience, and it's great to give something back to the viewer. So that way you make them feel something, whether that be whatever, if it's anger or sadness or whatever you're trying to emote, and make that viewer feel that. So it's just a really cool thing.
What would you say is your favorite role that you've done so far?
My favorite role. My favorite role, I believe, is, well, that's a good question. I actually enjoy doing comedy. I'm not a comedian. I'm not a funny guy. I have to really try. And I think that's why I like to do it, because it's tough for me to kind of go out on a limb and do something kind of comedic. And I just enjoy trying to do that. But I don't get a lot of those kind of roles because I just don't look like the funny guy. But I do get a lot of roles where I'm the more of the affluent, maybe a killer, a little psychotic, maybe under his skin, that kind of guy. Mm-hmm. I just have that natural look. So that kind of character for me is very easy to do, because that kind of ability to have that look and that. It just kind of comes natural for me, as weird as that sounds. But it's easy for me to do that. But being comedic or trying to be a love interest or that kind of a dramatic piece is harder for me. So I guess to answer the question, I would rather be doing some funny stuff. But my go-to character is the psychotic guy.
Now, speaking of that, I know you were in a short film, Rest Stop. For people that don't know, a lot of people that listen to the show know that I'm a huge Stephen King fan. But for people that don't know, Stephen King often will option rights to students in college to do student films for his different short stories and things like that for $1. He calls them dollar babies, and you were in Rest Stop, which is a one from Just After Sunset. That's the collection that it's in. What was it like working on that? And in that, you played not necessarily a killer, but someone with something seething under the surface, kind of like you were talking about.
Yeah, I tell you, that's amazing that you know what that's cool that you know about that. And how it came to be. This is exactly the situation. The director was allowed to do the movie, and he put his on. We changed it a little bit. There's a little twist in it, because the story originally goes, you have a character by the name of Rick Harding, mm-hmm. and that's the guy that I play, and that's the dark side of this writer that in the original Stephen King story. he's an author. He writes, and he starts to become his character that he writes about, and he takes over a situation at a rest stop, and he beats up a guy that's abusing his girlfriend, that kind of thing. Something that he would never normally do himself. But what this gentleman did, this young director, he took the story but changed it to where the author, the main character, is a female, and a black female at that, but her dark side is still Rick Hardin, which is me. Mm-hmm. So the same storyline still happens, but he has that twist where it's actually a female writer and not the male that was in the original Stephen King story. But it was a cool experience. I wish the night that we shot most of those scenes where my character came into play, I wish it was better weather. It was pretty rough. It was very cold, a lot of high wind, and it was so cold you couldn't hardly think. It's just one of those kind of nights. And the director, he landed 3 or 4 pages of dialogue in my lap that day. He forgot to give to me for months prior. I mean, it happens, but right. I was an oversight, but it put me in a unique position where I'm having to ask for a line every few words, and as I'm freezing to death, and as I'm trying to act like I'm beating this guy with a crowbar, it was tough, so right. It was a good experience, a good learning experience, and the footage turned out pretty good. Like I said, if I could change anything, I would have changed the weather that night, but that's the date they selected. They had to do it then for the location that they had, and it just is what it is. But I think it's very awesome to do some of Stephen King's works. He's one of my favorite, filmmakers and writers. Yeah, me too. And he's got some really cool stuff, man. And I can't wait to see what's that Pet Cemetery. I just saw that it's coming out at the theater again. Yeah, I got to go see that.
I think that's one we'll probably be talking about on the show at some point.
Oh man, I'd love to recreate that one. That'd be awesome. So, anyhow, but it was a good experience, and I had a good time, doing the film. And the copy of it went to Stephen King himself, so maybe he got to see my mug. I don't know.
Yeah, I think he watches. I know he keeps them on his shelf, at least from what I've read about what he says. Okay. What would be your dream scenario as far as, making it big or your career aspirations as an actor? Would you want to go more of the commercial route, get discovered in that way, more of the independent route, a la like Parker Posey or something like that? What would you envision as this is my dream scenario to get where I want to be?
That's a good question. I guess I have a couple of ambitions in life, and I also run a company, my own personal business called Morris Environmental, mm-hmm. and we do waterproofing. And we're here in Atlanta, and it's a family business. I have 2 sons as well. So I guess the perfect scenario for me is for me to be able to follow my passion full time, which is an actor, and be able to do some really cool stuff. I would love to be in a project. I would love to be in one of Clint Eastwood's projects if possible. I know he's getting up in time, but it would be great if somehow I could get a small supporting role in one of his movies. He's just one of my favorite of all time.
Okay.
And then I love to work alongside McConaughey because he's one of my favorites too as an actor. Even if it was something small, but those guys are some of my people I would love to be somehow tied in the same project together. That would be really cool. But I would love to be able to pursue acting full time and really make a living off of it, if not more than a living. You make an abundance of money, that'd be great. But just a fair living would be fine. But at the same time, I want to be able to have my company where it's well established and my sons can have a future for their families off the company as well. Mm-hmm. So I have a little bit of a balance, and the balance without the company and working for myself, I could not pursue acting as often as I do, because if you had a job, and there's just no way you can pursue this industry because it's so uncontrollable It's so wishy-washy. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to get the job for this part or not. You really to the last minute. You just don't know. You just need to be available all the time, and that's pretty much what they ask you. This industry is crazy, and it's not for everybody. It's tough, and I would love to really devote all my time into it. And I do devote a lot of time to it. Don't get me wrong, but I also manage a company too. So
Right.
it's a balance, and unfortunately, many actors out there are not full-time working actors, because to become a working actor is the goal for every actor.
Right.
And being a working actor means to be able to do it full-time and make a living off of doing it. Unfortunately, only a small, tiny little percentage of all the people that's in the Actors Guild union or that are actors in general are actually able to do that. It's just the nature of the beast, because you just don't know where the next job's going to come from. You're always chasing work. So the big names like McConaughey, Cruise, and Dwayne The Rock, and all those guys, they've created a franchise of their own off themselves. They produce a lot of their own projects because they can. So a lot of your smaller actors, or even your B-list actors, have a hard time making a full-time career, where they may have to do some side work sometimes when things get a little slow, or do projects that don't pay, or just work as on set, whatever. I mean, but I would love to be able to become a full-time working actor. That's my goal. And the dream would be to work in, like I say, I'd love to work with McConaughey somewhere down the road, and possibly work in a Clint Eastwood film before he goes up to the good spirit and sky.
Now, I mentioned The Walking Dead earlier. Obviously, that film's in Georgia. It takes place in Georgia, Atlanta, at least for part of it. Have you seen the show? And if you have seen the show, how upset does Andrew Lincoln, who's British, how upset does his Georgia accent make you?
Oh man, I tell you, I've seen the show, and I used to watch it religiously when it first came out. We would binge watch the first few seasons. Me and my wife did, and then somewhere we just kind of gave up on that, and I haven't watched it since. Now I did like it, and I think it's a cool show, and I think the timing of it was great. It was one of the first ones that came out that was a series, and it really caught on. But so many people have tried to recreate the zombie thing. It's just, kind of crazy. But, their Southern accent just sucks. I mean, I would love to spend just a few days with them, but like, look, man, this is what you're supposed to sound like. So, but I mean, with that said, to be British and be able to pull off what he has done, I mean, I got to give him credit where it's due.
Yeah, it's not easy.
It's not easy, man. I mean, to go from that to sounding like you're from the South is, I couldn't imagine the training and the amount of hours he had to put in to try to make himself to be able to pronounce the words the way that people that are born and raised in the South do naturally, Right. So here I try to speak with a less Southern accent, because it not sound too much like a country bumpkin, but it's one of those things. It's just part of who I am. And, I just, it is what it is. And I would love to be able to do a British accent as well as he does a Southern accent. Let's say that.
Right. Yeah. So everyone listening that thinks that, The Walking Dead, that's what a Georgia or an Atlanta area accent sounds like. It doesn't. It sounds like how Eric talks. It's funny because people will get, people will get the wrong idea about accents. A lot of people don't realize that people in Florida have accents too. And a lot of them there are different varieties of Southern accents depending on the area of the South. There's not just one generic Southern accent. And a lot of people, that's one thing that, because I've done a lot of traveling, that's one thing that will annoy me is people that try to do just a generic Southern accent. It's like, no, that's more Texas, or that's more Mississippi, or you're doing Louisiana. I mean, there's a lot of different variations as some regions go.
It's you're very true about that. I have more of a I don't know. I've been told I have kind of a Texas sound to my accent, but I lived in Texas for a while. I don't know if that's where I kind of picked up some of the Texas talk, but I lived out west of Atlanta, which is more of a kind of a country area for many years. And I think that's where I developed so much of the Southern accent that I have, because I've met other people that are born and raised here in Atlanta, and they don't speak with as much of an accent, hardly at all, compared to how mine sounds,
Right.
So, but then again, I've met other people that just sound wow, my goodness, man, that just sound super country. I mean, just as country as you can be, so it really depends on the person, what part of the state or what part of the South in general, because Texas has, they do have a very different kind of twang, but similar.
Yeah.
And then you get into Louisiana, man, you just don't know what you're going to get. I mean, I talked to people from there, I was like, what are you saying? Like, I don't know what they're talking about. So, like, write it down. So, but you're right, man. It varies, and unfortunately, stereotypes go with accents. They just do, and it's what TV tells you. If you have a Southern accent, you must be a dumb redneck, or if you have a New York accent, you must be a member of the mafia or something.
Right.
It's stuff like that. But I love the actors out there that carry their own accent and have done very well with it. McConaughey's one of them. His is not as much as it was when he first started. He's learned to tone it down some.
Yeah.
And then, so your heavy hitters that are from the New York area, dang it, what's his name, man? It's on the tip of my De Niro.
Oh, yeah.
He has an accent, and he's done remarkably well as an actor. And he did not change his accent. He is who he is. And I think that's great that actors are able to do that and be appreciated for who they are and where they're from, even though they're portraying another character. But their sound, they're not having to go and change the way they sound to try to be somebody. They're just being somebody else the best that they can be themselves. So I like that a lot.
Well, I want to thank you, Eric, for joining us today. Eric James Morris, like I said, catch him in Pageant Material that's coming out next week. I know you've got a lot of projects that you've done that are releasing, somewhat soon. Where can people find you online to keep up with everything that you're doing?
Yeah, first let me say on Pageant Material coming up, ironically, I do play a dumb redneck. So, ironic is that? But I had a good time with that role and that character. But anyhow, to find me, just go to IMDb, search for Eric James Morris, my full name, and you'll find me. I'm the only one on there with that name. Or you can Google Eric James Morris. You'll find some articles about me here and there. You can go to my Facebook page, which is Eric James Morris. Or if you want to hit me up on my personal page, feel free. It's just Eric Morris and the number 2. Or Instagram, Eric James Morris, all one word, no spaces.
Yeah, I'm not on that Instagram. I talk to a lot of people that do Instagram's the big one now, I guess. But I'm always about 2 steps behind when it comes to technology.
I'm not a big Instagrammer either. I do post occasionally just to have a presence, and but I guess I just missed that age gap. I guess I don't know, but I'm pretty active on Facebook. So,
well, thank you again for joining us, Eric James Morris. Check him out. Pageant Material. I haven't seen it. Obviously, it's not out yet. I have read the synopsis. It sounds absolutely fascinating. I think this one has a chance to be, a surprise for a lot of people. A kid that his mother dies, right, and he fulfills one of her wishes by entering a boy, and he's dresses as a woman to enter a transgendered pageant, right?
That's right. He wants to be in a high school pageant, and I believe it's his stepdad and his step brothers they treat him kind of rough because they don't, and they're a really redneck. The family is I believe the story's based in Alabama, I believe, and it's they really play on that with the characters. The dad and the brothers are very Southern, and And then, the Southern Bar where you're going to find me, my character, my name's Cecil. So I'm the guy that's hitting on her, and I don't realize that it's actually a guy. So, so I'm kind of a sleazy bar guy just having fun with this woman that I don't realize it's even that I think is a woman. So, but yeah, that's the synopsis of the story, and it's pretty cool. I mean, it touches with some things that's going on in the world these days, and it's well done. Had a big budget for a non-union production, and I think it's going to do very well. So yeah, look for it. I believe you guys may see it in the theater at some point.
Yeah, it definitely seems timely, and everyone check that movie out. I'm looking forward to seeing it when it comes out. Again, thanks for joining us, Eric James Morris, and we will talk to you later.
All right, thanks, man. You have a good night.
You too. But now we will move on to our main topic of the day, which is the comic institution that has been around for 44 years at this point, Saturday Night Live. A lot of you may know that Saturday Night Live got a lot of its origin and a lot of its origin talent for sure, and I'm sure some of its attitude from the National Lampoon magazine and the Groundlings, which was part of the National Lampoon, in the late 60s, early 70s. But 1975, Lorne Michaels brings a sketch comedy show to NBC late nights. Saturday Night Live. Do either of you guys, well, first let's say, do either of you guys have a favorite era of Saturday Night Live?
Go ahead, Nick.
I got started on Saturday Night Live early in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I was so familiar with the aughts, SNL, Will Ferrell era of SNL, but I really grew to like from 2009 to 2013, around that section. That's really where most of my, I guess, comedic inspiration comes from, is SNL in those years.
So then we're talking like Fred Armisen, Bill Hader, Seth Meyers, those guys.
Andy Samberg, all those boys.
Sudeikis and stuff, yeah.
Yep.
Kristen Wiig, I think, was still part of that cast.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Mike, what about you? Do you have a favorite era?
It's kind of a weird. It's actually kind of like in the middle of two different eras. It's like the time around when Norm Macdonald came on the show, which I think was like 95, 96.
Yeah, around there.
And then maybe a little bit, probably about halfway into the Will Ferrell era. That around that time, I just stopped liking it as much, or I stopped watching it for some reason or another.
And that makes sense to me. Like a lot of people have talked about, a lot of the creators of Saturday Night Live or people that are associated with Saturday Night Live has said usually the era that you're kind of in high school or early college tends to be people's favorite, and that does sort of fit with us. I'm not sure about you, Nicholas, if that era
No, that's exactly when I graduated high school and went into college.
So around the same kind of time period in life. But yeah, I have a couple different ones too, but that Norm Macdonald, like Tim Meadows, Will Ferrell, that cast I was really into, and even a little bit later into the aughts when, like Daryl Hammond and Chris Kattan, Chris Parnell. Chris Parnell was one of my favorites.
Yeah, I really like Chris Parnell.
Yeah.
But I also have just and I think this was because I think it was it E or Comedy Central? I think actually it was the E network for a while had the syndication rights to Saturday Night Live, and I used to watch for some reason they played this one all the time, but the 1980 to 85 cast, which was when Lorne Michaels actually wasn't really a part of it. But it was Joe Piscopo and Eddie Murphy in pretty much every single sketch. Mm-hmm. And they really carried that show for that period of time. And
you can't really blame someone for putting Eddie Murphy in every sketch.
Right, exactly. But so I really got into that era as well. So those would probably be my two ones. I guess we'll start at the beginning, but the 70 to 75 era is before all of our times. Although I have seen, a decent amount of it, but this is the original cast of Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, Chevy Chase, Jane Curtin, Garrett Morris, Lorraine Newman, and Michael O'Donoghue, who was the head writer and appeared in some sketches. He was on the very first sketch, actually, with John Belushi, and the late Gilda Radner.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought she was on the first season. I wasn't really sure. They used to play these, actually, on Comedy Central quite a bit, too. They went through these eras where they play pretty much any different, random episode of the series.
Yeah, and the problem with this era to me is that this, and maybe every era of Saturday Night Live, it's hard to tell, but especially this era, I think, is so much of its time. Like, a lot of people say John Belushi was, depending on what age group you're in, a lot of people say John Belushi was the best Saturday Night Live cast member ever. And the people that say that remember what the world was like in 1975.
Yeah.
And remember what comedy was like in 1975. Because the comedy of this era doesn't really hold up. There are a few sketches here and there that are still sort of, funny. But, I mean, this is the era of the land shark, where they're doing the Weekend Update, and a shark is just at the door for some reason, and that's supposed to be the height of hilarity. The Bassmaster is another famous sketch from this time, where it's just a blender where you put fish in and you can blend up your bass. I know it's like a infomercials and those kind of types of commercials were just getting their start during this time period. So I know that it's a play on that, but it doesn't hold up to me, at least. Do you guys, is there anything about this era that sort of stands out as memorable to you?
No, I have not laughed at any of those sketches I've seen from the earlier episodes of SNL. Obviously, the problem with comedy is it doesn't really age well. Mm-hmm. It's almost like math, where it's constantly building on the previous foundation. So, I mean, what was revolutionary in the mid to late 70s is just my children probably make jokes that are more risque than those for the most part.
Yeah.
And that's not, necessarily an insult. It's just, comedy is, it evolves as culture evolves. It's really kind of like a reflection of it in a lot of ways.
But yeah, like, Nicholas, do you have any memories of any of these sketches? Any of these cast members?
So I've watched a few of the greatest hits, and not many of them came from the first 2 or 3 seasons, honestly. Yep. You did have some really good performers like John Belushi, but they didn't really have the beauty of SNL that they gained later on. And I do think that that's because it was they were just getting started and they needed to be able to have something that they could repeat over time. And they did that really well, but they didn't have something that they could go above and beyond in the early seasons.
Yeah. And and honestly, the most memorable sketch that I can remember from this era, I only remember because of kind of how sad it is, honestly. Because it's John Belushi playing himself as an old man, saying that he's the last living member of the Not Ready for Primetime Players, and he goes to the graveyard to talk to all the headstones of that have the names etched on of all the other Not Ready for Primetime Players. And, he's like, oh, you all thought because of my fast lifestyle I'd be the first to go, but, I'm the last. And it's sort of him reflecting on his life and everything. And it's so sad and ironic because obviously he was the first to die of all of them. So that's the only reason I remember it.
You have to love that euphemism just gently tossed in there. I live a fast lifestyle.
Yeah.
I'd say your lifestyle is pretty quick.
Yeah, if by fast lifestyle you mean mounds of cocaine and heroin, then yes.
Well, I guess speedball is a fast thing.
Oh, God.
At least not entirely wrong.
Oh, man. But yeah, so the next
Rest in peace.
yeah, the next era is the 1980 to 85. Like I said before, like we're roughly dividing this into who was the head writer. That's kind of how I'm roughly dividing these. The main head writer that sort of molds the
Yeah, that
tone
makes
of the
sense. I
show.
think they definitely set the tone for the series.
Yeah. So this is after Lorne Michaels left. He had been doing the show for 5 years. He decided he wanted a break. He went on to produce and help write a couple movies. The Three Amigos was during this time that he wasn't on here anymore. And he left in charge Jean Domanian. I think that's how you say her name, or Jean Domanian, maybe. But she was the producer for Saturday Night Live during this era. Later, Dick Ebersol took over, who was one of the executives at NBC at the time. But this was they had lost pretty much all the not ready for primetime players. A lot of people left with Lorne. There were talks that Lorne was kind of forced out. He said he needed a break. Nobody really knows exactly what happened, but I know that there were some cast members and writers that picked up and left with Lorne Michaels. So either he got forced out and they left in solidarity, or they thought that the show was going to tank without him. But
They weren't wrong.
yeah, exactly. But so the show started off real rocky until later in the year, actually kind of towards the end of the year, they discovered a 19-year-old comedian named Eddie Murphy and decided to give him a shot at the show to be only the second black cast member, I believe, after Garrett Morris. But yeah, so he joined the show, and then they got Joe Piscopo, and they famously, they at one point they fired everyone except for Joe Piscopo. After the 1980 season, when they went to the 81-82 season, Joe Piscopo and Eddie Murphy were the only two not fired. Everyone,
Yeah, I think
everyone else
Gilbert
was
Godfrey
replaced.
was part of that purge.
Yep, yeah, exactly.
Oh, no, maybe I don't think that's right. Actually, I think he was. Like,
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't write down.
I know he was only on for one season, but they did fire everybody after a season, so maybe it was 1980.
Yes, yeah.
But there were a lot of sketches that I remember from this era, including Eddie Murphy played Gumby, famously, where he would, I'm Gumby, damn it. It's like dressed up as Gumby. There was Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood, which was like a Mr. Robinson's neighbor, or Mr.
Rogers.
Yeah, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, like spin-off where he lived in like a tenement slum. And then the big one that they sort of it was Buckwheat. He played Buckwheat. And they had this big thing where Buckwheat gets shot, and then the guy who shot Buckwheat gets shot. It's a play on the Kennedy assassination, like 20 years later for some reason. But it actually is really funny. And Eddie Murphy, I think Eddie Murphy is, if not the best, the most important, at least, cast member in Saturday Night Live history, because without Eddie Murphy, the show doesn't exist anymore.
It really doesn't.
If Eddie,
at one point,
yeah, go ahead.
At one point, the host canceled. I don't remember who, and Eddie Murphy just took over the entire show. Just okay, I'll do it all, and he saved the show.
Yeah. If they hadn't let Eddie Murphy on or discovered Eddie Murphy or whatever in 1980, and he just did his stand up and then did movies and had never been on Saturday Night Live, the show would have been canceled. There's no doubt in my mind. So he absolutely saved the show, and Joe Piscopo, who did not go on to a good career like Eddie Murphy at least did for a while. after Saturday Night Live. If you go back and look at those episodes, he was also really good on that show for that period of time. He did a Frank Sinatra impression. There were some other, things that he famously did, but he was very funny on that show. And he was the other, he wasn't as important as Eddie Murphy, but he was the other big catalyst for the show during that time period. And then, no, you're right. Yeah, okay. It's in my notes. So when Dick Ebersol came in 1981, he fired Gilbert Gottfried, Charles Rocket, and somebody else, basically everyone else. And he replaced him with Robin Duke, the Canadian actress. Tim Kaczorski, I think is his name. He's from... Probably the only thing that anyone would recognize him from is he's that little mousy guy from the Police Academy movies.
Oh, he what's his name? Pipsqueak or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, but yeah, so they replaced him with him and Tony Rosetto, the most stereotypical Italian person ever to be on Saturday Night Live. But they didn't last super long. They brought Catherine O'Hara in from SCTV. They got some SCTV people to come in, which helped prop up some of their cast. And then, so that's when Dick Ebersol kind of took over the show, and they kept Eddie Murphy and Joe Piscopo. But yeah, so that era, I think, like I said, that's probably another one of my favorite eras, but only because Eddie Murphy was so brilliant during that era of Saturday Night Live.
Yeah. And contrary to what I said earlier about comedy not aging well, his whiteface sketch is still hilarious. I mean, it's just amazing to watch.
And there are a few times where you can find... I agree with you in general. I think comedy does reflect the era that it's in, and a lot of times it doesn't age well. But every once in a while, you'll get something, if it's a movie or a sketch or, even at least... It's harder with a TV show, but at least... some seasons of a TV show, you'll get something that stands the test of time like that and is just universally funny forever. And yeah, that White Like Me, I think it was called, is hilarious.
Yeah, every part, I mean, it's just a perfect sketch.
But then we move on to the 1985 to 1990 cast, which is when Lorne Michaels returns. And this is when we get a lot of the... sort of, like Jim Downey comes on at this point, Jim Downey gets a bigger role in the show at this point. Al Franken comes back because Lorne Michaels has come back, and we get some of the people that were mainstays for a while. They got Randy Quaid. Randy Quaid was in a season of this. Robert Downey Jr. was in a season.
Anthony Michael Hall.
Yep, Anthony Michael Hall and Joan Cusack. Then Nora Dunn and John Lovitz, and Phil Hartman starts during this era as well.
Yeah, they definitely calibrated their talent search at this point. I mean, so many people from this era are still, regularly working in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, and Dana Carvey and Mike Myers came at the very kind of tail end of this era, in the late 80s. I think the 80-89 season.
I think at this point, maybe its reputation started to precede itself, where people would, when they were younger, be like, hey, I want to be on SNL when I get older. People would watch it maybe in the very earliest era, where probably had watched it when they were in their teens, and now they were, in the comedy field. So they had people, actually probably actively trying to be on the show at this point.
Yep. So this era, do you remember much about this era, Nicholas? Or have you seen much of this era?
I've seen some skits from it. Again, from the top SNL scenes of the 80s and 90s, but I don't. This is the period of time where I have no clue what happened in SNL.
Oh yeah, it's okay. You're our ringer for the current and a few years ago casts, because Mike and I don't know much about that at all. But yeah, Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer came out during this time. Phil Hartman's Phil Hartman's character there. I think Massive
Yeah,
Head
Frank-
Wound Harry started around this time.
Yeah, that's well, you said. I think you're right that Eddie Murphy for sure is the most important cast member ever. Phil Hartman could very possibly have been the best cast member ever. I mean, he was on there for quite some time. He played a Ronald Reagan at one point. That's how long he was on the show.
Yeah.
For. I mean, he was just a talent all around. Everything he's in, he steals the scene. Even if it's not a great scene, he's still great in it. And
he was so good. Like, he was the perfect sketch actor because he could do pretty much anything. Like, he wasn't such a big personality that he would get pigeonholed in any one thing or any one kind of sketch. You could put him in any sketch, playing any kind of role, and he could do it.
Yeah, he would just play like a generic character that would just be hilarious. He's definitely one of the greatest. But he was also great in. Unfortunately, we can't talk about him for much because he left the show, and then I think everyone knows what happened to him tragically years later. Mm-hmm. But he was great on news radio. When he's in movies, he's great. He's just completely talented. Hilarious guy. Probably one of the. I would say he's definitely my top 3 of the best cast members of SNL of all time.
Absolutely. And one of the sketches from this era that I still remember from him was one of the commercials, and it was when Roseanne Barr was the guest host. And he, Phil Hartman, and this is the brilliance of Phil Hartman too, he played the customer it was a parody of one of those commercials where he lost his credit card, and he was calling customer service to see what he could do about it. So they switch back and forth between the two of them. They're not in the same room or anything like that. But Phil Hartman's giving the story, and then Roseanne Barr's also giving her side of the story. And his side of the story is the straight-laced one you'd actually see in the commercial, and her side of the story is more of Roseanne Barr's type of humor, where...
Yeah, I remember that sketch. It was pretty funny.
It's like he's like... I called her up because, I'd lost my credit card while I was on a trip to Seattle or something like that. And she's like, so this guy calls me up crying about, I lost my credit card. What are you going to do? And it just goes back and forth between those extremes. But the funniest part about it is she goes, I told him, hey, why don't you write all your complaints down on a little piece of paper, roll it up in a little tube and cram it. And then they go back to Phil Hartman, and everyone's still laughing over that. And he goes, she gave me several options. And it's just like his deadpan delivery is so funny. But that's one of the best sketches from that era for sure. Oh. But the next cast is we're getting towards your and my era, Mike. But this is the 1990 to 95 season. And Dana Carvey's still there. Phil Hartman's still there. This is when we add Jan Hooks, Victoria Jackson, Dennis Miller, Mike Myers is still there, Kevin Nealon joins. And this is the beginning of what will be the core of the next cast members that came around 90, 91 with Chris Farley, Tim Meadows, and Chris Rock.
And Adam Sandler too, right?
Yeah, Adam Sandler was a featured player in 91, along with Rob Schneider and David Spade, and then they would obviously in the next era they become full cast members. But this is another pretty strong. I mean, there's a lot of hit and miss sketches during this era. This is maybe the most schizophrenic era, I think, of Saturday Night Live, where there's some pretty decent sketches, and then there are some sketches that just fall completely flat. But like Wayne's World, it started a little before this, but really kind of comes into its own during the beginning of this era. And in 92, that's when they actually made the movie. But this is sort of like kind of when all that stuff starts. So that's a big one. The Chris Farley, becoming part of the cast is obviously a big moment. Chris Farley was, a lot of people compared him to John Belushi, and unfortunately, it wasn't just in his comedy stylings.
Yeah.
He lived a fast lifestyle as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, so he came on and was kind of not quite instantly a hit, but he was a pretty big hit right away. The Pat sketch came around this Opera Man and Canteen Boy, the Matt Foley Van Down by the River stuff sort of starts here. And then the one that a lot of people, and this is like, those commercials, like the Budweiser, like, what's up, and stuff like that. People would do that all the time. This is how I felt about this sketch, but I can remember being a kid and people all the time going on, making copies.
Yeah, I was watching the Mighty Ducks the other day, and there's like a complete blatant ripoff of that with one of the characters. He's doing that character.
Yeah, and that's, oh my God, it was so, like, I never found that sketch funny. It was always so annoying to me for so many reasons.
And one of the weirdest things I saw as far as that sketch went was was when the Branch Davidian compound was surrounded by the ATF agents, and they had the guy making copies working for David Koresh. It was so weird.
See, and I always wanted the sketches to turn darker. Like, I always thought that, like, and that was kind of a highlight, but I always, whenever I was watching them, even as like a 12-year-old kid, I was always like, this would be so much funnier because it's such like kind of lame humor. This would be so much funnier if like it turned like really dark, like he lifts up the copy machine and he's making a copy of like someone's foot that he like had cut off or something. Like I always thought that would improve the sketches to contrast with kind of how corny it was. But yeah, so this era, like I said, kind of hit or miss. Obviously, Phil Hartman is still killing it. This at the like the did Norm Macdonald take over Weekend Update towards the end of this one? When he came out in '94, did he start right away?
I don't think it was right away. It might have been the second season.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, this era is kind of like when your favorite sports team goes to the championship game and loses, and then the very next one is when they win it all.
Yeah, exactly, because they were getting all the pieces together, and they were kind of like about to explode. Yeah, that's a very good analogy. Oh,
and even in this era, you could see people like would start to be like in movies more often. I mean, obviously the core group, they were, a lot of them became movie stars, but you just like Victoria Jackson's randomly in a movie, and
Yep.
She's in the UHF movie, and then just like they just kind of like just appear in movies all over the place. They're kind of like everywhere at this point, and you're adding like people like I think Bob Odenkirk was a writer in this era. Yep. Conan O'Brien, which would explain a lot of the weird sketches. Conan O'Brien's sense of humor is I like it a lot, but it's very interesting. It's definitely inspired by the National Lampoon, that sort of thing.
Yep, I totally agree with that. And yeah, like I think
Robert Smigel as well. I think around this year, as you described earlier in the SNL movie, he was definitely on the staff.
Yep, and this was like Jim Downey had already been around for a while and was pretty established, and he was exerting even more control over the day-to-day kind of writing of the show at this point. He was like, really like at this point, this was kind of when everyone was like, oh, this guy's a legend. Like he really had fully attained his legendary status during this time period. But I think this is the era that really kind of revitalized the show in the public consciousness. Like it had started, it might not be the best. And like you said, I think that's a good analogy where they're kind of getting everything together and they like win the championship next season. But this is
it's
when
like the Lakers, even in spite of Isaiah breaking his ankle and playing on, they still lose the Lakers this season.
Exactly. But this is kind of when they become relevant again in the consciousness of society. But this is in this era, this Chris Farley and Patrick Swayze as the dueling Chippendales dancers.
Yeah.
That's part of this
Which
era.
might be the funniest sketch on the history of the entire show.
Yeah, that's a great one. I also believe one of my favorite sketches is from this era. I'm almost positive, where it's Chris Farley again, and he plays a man at a restaurant, and someone comes over and says that they switched his coffee with
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yes,
with instant coffee, and he just destroys everything.
Yeah, there are a lot.
It's so funny.
Chris Farley, another like probably top 5 for sure of all time cast members. I mean,
Absolutely.
you could basically just put him on a stage and let him go, and he would just like. There's the one where he's playing a person being killed in a play. Did you remember that one, Mark?
Yes.
But they say his parents are in the audience, so he's just going on for like easily 5 minutes, if not 10, just like having this elaborate like death scene.
Oh yeah, and Chris Farley was one of those guys that was universally, he had universal appeal. Like my mom thought he was hilarious. I thought he was hilarious. There were people younger than me that thought he was hilarious. There were grandmothers that thought he was funny. Because it was a lot of physical stuff and simpler type of humor, not really like satire or political or like any kind of that type of humor. And obviously there's a place for that, and Saturday Night Live has done a lot of that. But his was just kind of more physical and broader and simpler, and just had that kind of mass appeal, and people just loved him.
It was like a primordial sense of humor, It's just you couldn't help but like laugh at what he did. He would just like rip the laughter out of you. It was just so hysterical what he would do.
Absolutely. And so there were a lot of big sketches here. This was also the era when Saturday Night Live had one of its bigger controversies, when Sinead O'Connor was a musical guest and ripped up a picture of the Pope on TV. And I think Joe Pesci hosted the next week, and he said something like, "Oh, I'd like to get my hands on Sinead O'Connor," or something, because obviously he's Italian and Catholic.
Did he tape the picture up or something like that? I can't remember if it was the episode right after or...
Yeah, it was something like that. I remember he had something to say about it as a Catholic, obviously. But yeah, that this was definitely a good era, and then we move on to the 95 to 2000 era, and this would have been when we were in high school, Mike. And this was, all the people I mentioned before. Like Chris Farley, I think actually left in 95. So he's
it's been around there.
He's like the tail end of this.
Most of 95 was completely new people, with the exception of Norm.
Yeah.
And one other person, I don't remember who.
Yeah,
Ted Meadows probably.
Most of them went on to like Hollywood careers, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, Adam Sandler was in for I don't even know how long he was on the show for, maybe 5 years, and then he just basically went into movie stardom directly from.
Yep. But then Jim Brewer starts on this show. Then you get Will Ferrell, Daryl Hammond, David Koechner is around for a little while, and I love David Koechner. Obviously, Norm comes around. He starts doing the Weekend Updates. Mark McKinney's on this cast. Tim Meadows, Sherry O'Terry, Molly Shannon, David Spade.
Was Jay Moore on the cast, or was it right at... He was on there for 2 seasons, maybe, right?
Yeah, I think Jay Moore was... I'm trying to think. I think Jay Moore was right... I think he was in 95. Yeah, I think it was... He was a featured player in 94, 95, I think. So, right at the tail end of the last one at the beginning of this one.
Sure.
But obviously, Mark McKinney had a tie-in with Lorne Michaels, because Lorne Michaels produced The Kids in the Hall, which he was a part of.
And he and Bruce McCulloch actually wrote on SNL. I can't remember at what point, but it was maybe a season or 2.
Yep. And Norm Macdonald starts doing the Weekend Update. Easily my favorite Weekend Update host. Oh, I forgot to mention back in the 80s when Dennis Miller started doing the Weekend Update. before before Norm Macdonald did the Weekend Update, I did kind of like his Miller's Weekend Update. The whole and Mike knows I do this all the time. The hey babe, thing. But I love.
Yeah, I think he's funny. I like him as well.
The one thing that I'll never forget that he did was, and this was during the time period when the ratings were really bad and it looked like the show was probably going to get canceled. On Weekend Update, they said that they were doing a contest to spell Muammar Gaddafi's name correctly. And if you could spell his name correctly, to write it in, in an envelope, put it in the mail, and mail it into Saturday Night Live, and he gives the address and everything, and you won some kind of prize. And he said this offer is only good for as long as Saturday Night Live is on the air and live. And then he pauses for a second and goes, so you might want to hurry those entrants. But yeah, like he had a very good, he wasn't as good in sketches, but he had a very good demeanor and kind of sarcastic way that was perfect for the Weekend Update. And then Norm Macdonald just took over and completely changed the way it could be done, and sort of showed, even though no one else has ever done it this way, showed how it should be done. Because he perfected it to an art form where he didn't care how many laughs it got. In fact, if a joke got, the fewer laughs the jokes got, the better it was for him, honestly. He's the only comedian outside of Johnny Carson that I've ever seen be funnier when a joke doesn't work than when the joke does work. Because Johnny Carson was
enormous.
Yeah, Johnny had one of those things where he could just somehow make a bad joke and a bad audience reaction into big laughs, and Norm Macdonald was the same way.
Yeah, Norm is just as fearless. He does not care. He'll say whatever joke. He'll hammer O.J. Simpson for years and years. He'll keep using his Frank Stallone line, probably to the point where it stops being funny, then is funny because of how funny it is. He's just a genius. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, that OJ stuff, that was hilarious. After,
just because it's so uncomfortable, that's part of his joke.
And yeah, and it was so great too, because after the day, I think it was the day after, or a couple days after O.J. Simpson was acquitted in the murder charges, he comes on to Weekend Update and says, well, it's official. Murder is now legal in the state of California. And it's just, and you knew he was going to say something. And with all that pressure, he just comes up with the perfect line and the perfect delivery. It's just brilliance.
It even cost him his job eventually. That's how much he pushed on that particular subject.
Yep. And I don't blame him. It's, like all he was doing is telling the truth. And when you can tell the truth and make it funny, it really does have a huge, it makes it much funnier. When you're...
Yeah, Norm describes a perfect joke as the setup and punchline being identical.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, but yeah, so this is a pretty big era. Jim Breuer kind of gets overlooked a little bit. He's pretty good in some of these sketches.
Yeah, I didn't like a lot of his characters, but in general, I do like Jim Breuer. He's pretty funny. He's on a lot of podcasts I listen to. He's a great guest. By all descriptions, he's a terrific stand-up comedian. I didn't care for a lot of his characters on this era.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we get towards the end of this era, the ones that I don't really love, like Chris Kattan never really did anything that I found very funny on any of the sketches that he was in, and Sherry O'Terry was sort of hit or miss to me.
Yeah, there were some characters she did that I liked a lot, but hit or miss for sure.
But other than that, you've got Will Ferrell, you got Daryl Hammond, Tim Meadows, Tracy Morgan comes on towards the end of this era. Molly Shannon was usually, there were some characters she did that I didn't love either, but she was usually pretty solid in kind of any sketch she was in. Colin Quinn even had some decent moments on the show. And
I don't think he ever really translated well to the show.
Yeah.
No, like even he did a couple sketches that I found, like I found the sketches funny and he happened to be in them, but you could tell he wasn't really like a driving force of any of the sketches.
Yeah, some people just aren't good fits. Like Dave Attell was a writer, I think, during this era around '95, and Dave Attell is hilarious, but he was only there for a season or.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, like some people like Jim Brewer, like I find Jim Brewer funny in a lot of things, but maybe, he's not as suited for Saturday Night Live takes a pretty specific skill set to kind of, to kind of fit into it. And
Yeah, it's really kind of because like some people will just make them seem funnier, like Chris Kattan, for example.
Yep.
Yeah.
And others will kind of throttle them, like Jim Brewer. I mean, Jim Brewer can't be fully Jim Brewer because it'd probably be like insanity. But I mean, it's. And then some people like Norm Macdonald the show is just basically giving him a spotlight to do his thing.
Yeah, and like this, to me, the workman of this era would be Tim Meadows, I think. Tim Meadows, kind of like Daryl Hammond, or kind of like Phil Hartman, is another one of those guys that just fit in to pretty much anywhere you wanted to put him, and he would be good in a sketch.
Yeah.
Always funny, Tim Meadows. I mean, I am yet to see a sketch where he's not hilarious.
Obviously, you probably know my favorite Tim Meadows sketch, Mike.
There could be a couple. Is it the the census one or?
Yeah, the census takers.
Yeah,
my favorite
that's
one.
really good.
In. And he kind of like Phil Hartman. He's in. I don't know if you know this one, Nicholas, but it's one of the many times that Christopher Walken guest hosted the show, and Tim Meadows comes in. It's around the census time, and he comes in and he says that he wants to fill out the census form for this guy, so he needs to ask him some questions, and it's Tim Meadows being completely straight-laced, being the straight man, which he's brilliant at, and Christopher Walken being the crazy guy. And he goes, how many people live here? And he goes, oh, that's hard to say. Here, I'll do my Christopher Walken impression.
Okay.
Well, it's hard to say. We've got some, I would say maybe 45. But he's like, 45 people live in this apartment, sir? And he goes, well, we've got there's some plants and, it's like, and he like lists like plants and candy bars and stuff like that. And
his bobcat wife.
Yeah. And Tim Meadows just kind of stares at him and he goes, well, we don't really count plants or candy bars, sir. And he goes, well, then I guess it's just me. Because I kind of overshot it with that 45. But yeah, so it's like they go back and forth like doing that with him giving crazy answers and Tim Meadows being the straight man, and it's one of the funnier sketches I've ever seen on the show.
Yeah, it's hilarious. There's another weird sketch of Tim Meadows, and this is odd because I think it was like a Matt Foley sketch where David Spade has like this inexplicably like a mesh like shirt that's like a kind of like a muscle shirt that says Hawaii 1989.
Uh-huh.
And then later, Tim Meadows is in a sketch wearing the exact same shirt.
Yeah.
And he goes, do you like my shirt? I got it in Hawaii, 1989. Not for sale. I don't even remember what sketch it was. It was just such a weird thing. It just sticks out.
Oh. But yeah, this was definitely a strong era. Towards the end of this era, Colin Quinn and Sherry O'Terry leave. I believe Tim Meadows leaves at the I think he leaves right at the end of this. And then they bring in a few different players. They bring in Rachel Dretch comes in and Maya Rudolph comes in during this time, like at the very end of this time period. It's interesting, the eras overlap a little bit when you look at the main cast and the featured players, because a lot of the featured players obviously end up becoming part of the main cast. Jimmy Fallon comes in, towards the tail end of this time too, with Horatio Sands. Chris Parnell comes in during this time period towards like 98, 99. And then we go into the 2000 to 2005 cast, which is that's when Jimmy Fallon becomes a regular cast member. Will Ferrell's still there. Anna Gasteyer, Daryl Hammond, Chris Kattan, Tracy Morgan, Chris Parnell, Horatio Sands, and then Rachel Dretch, Tina Fey, Jerry Minor, and Maya Rudolph are featured players at the beginning of this. And then the next year, that's when you get Seth Meyers and Fred Armisen comes in, and Will Forte and those guys.
This is actually kind of interesting in this era because there's actually quite a big influence from another sketch comedy troupe, the Upright Citizens Brigade.
Yep.
Adam McKay and Horatio Sands were both original members of the Upright Citizens Brigade, as was Amy Poehler. Adam McKay and Horatio Sands kind of like went separate ways, but Amy Poehler was actually on a sketch comedy show on Comedy Central called the Upright Citizens Brigade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so, I mean, there was like 3 out of 5 of the original members were on SNL, kind of at the same time, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely. The Upright Citizens Brigade definitely kind of influences this era a lot, and they blend pretty well with the the other casts. McKay actually was a writer from 95 to 2001 on Saturday Night Live.
I think he became the head writer at some point, and he worked very closely with Will Ferrell, and obviously went on to write a lot of the Will Ferrell movies, and now he's kind of directing movies. I think he directed The Big Short.
Yeah.
And there's some other movie, like a non-Will Ferrell project that came out recently, but that's right. And he has a pretty well-known feud with Jim Breuer, which seems to be mostly from Jim Brewer's side, but
yeah,
that's kind of.
But yeah, this era, it kind of almost like the the beginning of the 90s, like the 95 era. It's funny because this is exactly 10 years later, 2000 to 2005. This era, again, for me, is a little of a schizophrenic era because you have Will Ferrell doing a lot of really fun stuff. You have Daryl Hammond doing a lot of good stuff. Tracy Morgan, is very funny during this era, as is Chris Parnell. Horatio Sands is pretty funny during this time too. And they've got a lot of good sketches from this time period. But then there's also, there's some, like Chris Kattan's doing some stuff I don't really love. Anna Gasteyer, same kind of thing. And I think, I'm trying to remember who's doing the Weekend Update during this.
Mark?
Yeah, is it Fallon?
Yeah. No. I'm sorry. I just found out this episode's being sponsored by Corky Romano, so maybe we need to cut back in the Kattan.
Oh my God! Yeah,
it's a shot-by-shot remake.
I guess we're not above. We're not above taking Corky Romano money.
I'm not. I'm certainly not.
You guys want some cookies?
As a child, that was a good movie. As an adult, I don't know what.
Oh, you've seen it?
Yes, I watched that as a child. It was.
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh no is correct.
Oh my God! But yeah, Fallon starts doing Weekend Update at this point, and they do a lot. Obviously,
was it with Tina Fey initially, or was he by himself at first?
I think he was by himself at first, and then Tina Fey joins him in, I think around the 2001 season. Around 9/11. It was the other disaster that happened.
Oh, no.
No, I'm just joking. But, she joins them around then. But they obviously in 2000, they do a lot of the presidential stuff.
Yeah, this was a very heavily politicized era. Like, there were big chunks of the show that were just entirely dedicated to...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was kind of when everyone was starting to become really interested in politics for whatever reason.
I think the Daily Show probably influenced it a lot. They probably showed that you could actually get pretty big ratings, especially being like a late night show on Comedy Central.
Yeah.
So naturally, the instinct is to copy everybody else.
But there's, as we go forward in this era, and I don't hate Tina Fey. I didn't love her on the Weekend Update necessarily. It's I don't know. It's always hard for me to warm up to any Weekend Update people after Norm Macdonald. But she did some sketches that were really funny, and a lot of the stuff that she did with Amy Poehler was funny. A lot of Maya Rudolph. It kind of, to me, this era is sort of, besides Will Ferrell and besides Will Ferrell basically, because I didn't love a lot of what Jimmy Fallon did on the show, and I don't really love him I'm not a big Jimmy Fallon seems like a very nice guy, and I'm sure he is a very nice and lovely person, and I don't like to say a ton of stuff about him, but I'll just say his type of humor is not my type of humor.
I am also on board with that.
But he seems like a really nice guy, and I'm glad he's successful, because it's nice when nice guys are successful. But so I don't wish him to fail or anything. But but he's just I don't get it. I don't find him funny. But I would
and he's obviously notorious for just ruining sketches left and right, unless he's the star of the sketch.
Absolutely. But yeah, I would say aside from Will Ferrell and Daryl Hammond, this is kind of the women's era as far as Saturday Night Live goes, because you've got Rachel Dratch, Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, Maya Rudolph, and they carried a lot of the water for.
A lot of guests there too. You said, right?
Yeah.
Earlier. Yeah, I really liked her a lot. Actually, I thought she was pretty funny.
Yeah, she's another one of those that was she didn't do a lot of memorable characters or anything like that, but she filled a lot of roles, and she was really funny in a lot of sketches that she was in. But yeah, so that's this era is really dominated by the ladies.
But there are a lot of brilliant Will Ferrell sketches during this time frame, the one where he's a doctor and the couple has come to inquire about their baby, the Tobey Maguire airplane pilot sketch.
Yep.
The one where Pierce Brosnan is a guest host, and he's just this really tyrannical boss at a travel writing magazine.
Yes.
Yep.
They're just some completely insane sketches that how they got on the air, probably because Adam McKay was involved too. I mean, they're just so brilliant they don't belong on the show in a way.
And I believe this is the era of the cowbell sketch too. I'm almost positive.
Oh yeah, it is, because Horatio Sands and Jimmy Fallon almost ruins the entire sketch by laughing.
And I'll tell you, this is another reason why I love Chris Parnell so much, is Chris Parnell keeps his shit through that entire sketch.
Yes, he absolutely does.
And that's that was the fact that you could never get him to break, and he pretty much always played the straight man, was part of one of the reasons why I loved him so much on this show. But so they're obviously, those sketches, I believe Robert Smigel and the ambiguously gay duo, that started around this time as well.
Yeah, which is interesting. I didn't realize until much later that Steve Carell and what's the other guy's name? Stephen Colbert did the voice.
Yep. That's a fun piece of trivia too.
Another fun piece of trivia is I think Stephen Colbert wrote for 1 month exactly on the show. It was November 1996, 1 month only. He wrote for the show.
Yep. But yeah, so I think I'm trying to think this era was also that when Ashley Simpson was caught lip syncing.
Yep.
on her performance, that sort of kind of ruined her career. But yeah, to
be fair, her music also contributed to
that. Towards the end of this era is when we start getting Finesse Mitchell and Rob Riggle, Jason Sudeikis, and Kenan Thompson, who's obviously still on the show now.
Yeah.
But so that's where that's what we get here. And Tina Fey and Amy Poehler eventually do the Weekend Update job together during this time period as well.
Yeah, I like them as a pair much better than Tina Fey and Jimmy Fallon. Amy Poehler is for sure 100% funnier than Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah, I agree, and I did kind of enjoy them as co-hosts on that thing. But then we get to, oh, I think I skipped one. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and then we get to the 2005 to 2010 era, which is when we start to get Bill Hader, who I like a lot, I think is very funny. Andy Samberg comes on, and Kristen Wiig makes her start too around this time. We've still got Fred Armisen, Rachel Dretch, Tina Fey, Will Forte, Daryl Hammond, Seth Meyers, Vanessa Mitchell, Chris Parnell, Amy Poehler, Maya Rudolph, Horatio Sands, and Kenan Thompson. And this is...
this era...
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is when Horatio Sands started joining Tina Fey and Amy Poehler on the Weekend Update.
Yeah.
Well, I watched this a little during this time. I didn't even know he did that.
Yeah, just for that one season, I believe.
Yeah, this is notable for when Andy Samberg, Akiva Schaffer, and Yorma Taccone all joined the Lonely Island sketch comedy troupe.
Yep.
They're just absorbed en masse by SNL. Andy Samberg had a lot more experience supposedly doing stand-up than the rest of the group, so he was a feature player probably at first.
Yeah.
And the other two were writers, but they obviously focused a lot on the digital short sketches, which one of the first ones that was really popular was Lazy Sunday with Andy Samberg and Chris Parnell.
Yep. That's one of my favorites.
And then they had like a slew of hits. I mean, they've done at least 100 digital shorts, where they would just record something and then just present it. And, obviously a very popular segment of the show. They went on to the movie Hot Rod, which is an almost identical ripoff of the movie Dirty Work, just not nearly as funny.
Yep.
Like the exact premise is identical.
Yep.
And then they went on to do, more successful things like the movie Popstar, which is, I don't think it was promoted very well, but it was a really funny movie if you ever get a chance to watch that one.
I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one, but I will definitely
I like that one. That's if it's the music is great in that, just like a bunch of ridiculous like parts. But I didn't care for Hot Rod myself.
Yeah, I did see Hot Rod, and I didn't like that one that much. But yeah, Mike and I have very similar senses of humor. So if you think it's funny, Mike, I will definitely check it out. But yeah, so in this era, we move from those people, and then towards the end, that's when we kind of get Abby Elliott and Bobby Moynihan and Nassim Pedrad and Jenny Slate come in.
Is this around when you started watching, Nick, or was it a little earlier than this?
Yeah, this is actually with the introduction of Andy and Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig. This is really where I started getting into it. So like, I from Go, The Lonely Island was huge with the high school teens around me. So I was like very into the Lonely Island sketches. And then as I started getting older and such, I started getting into the actual SNL bits of it, because The Lonely Island was their own thing technically, but it was also not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then it happened to be like a very fortunate time period because YouTube came out around this time, so you could watch these sketches as much as you wanted to. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, did you see that sketch last week at SNL? Like, no, I didn't. Like, well, sorry.
Yeah.
I guess you'll just have to hear me describe.
Yeah. Yeah, YouTube.
And they would never do reruns other than like on Comedy Central when Mark and I were younger.
Yeah.
We would literally, there's sketch. If you miss a sketch, you probably will never see it again. Then
YouTube took away one of my best party tricks, which is I would watch. My memory is not as good as it used to be, but I used to have a very good memory, and I would watch the Celebrity Jeopardy sketch that was on the night before, and then for anyone that didn't see it or whatever, I was YouTube. I would perform it for everybody because I would remember it, and everyone thought it was the most hilarious thing. I'd go to a party or whatever, and they'd be like, "Oh, do one of the Celebrity Jeopardies," because they had it was one of my favorite sketches. Norm Macdonald, and Downey, and they all wrote that. And they're some of my favorite writers from the show. But yeah, YouTube took that away from me. Now no one cares anymore. Yeah, so this era is kind of when I started to stop watching the show. I love Bill Hader. I think he's hilarious. And Daryl Hammond and a lot of the Seth Meyers I think is funny a lot of times. There's a lot of people on this era that I like, but I just kind of I don't know. I was like doing other stuff. My daughter was born. My oldest daughter was born around this time, in 2005. So around the beginning of this era. So I didn't have a lot of time to watch it anymore.
I've seen people kind of pop up here, like John Mulaney, who I know you're a big fan of, became a writer around this time.
Yeah.
Hannibal Buress, the stand-up comedian, hilarious guy, co-host of the Eric Andre Show. He was a writer for a season in this era. I think it was 2009.
Mm-hmm. Yep, this is also around the time period when the Stefan sketches became big, and Bill Hader performed that, and that was one of the ones that Mulaney wrote. And one of the things that I think is hilarious about those sketches is, and Bill Hader tells this story all the time, is that he and Mulaney would write the sketches and everything, and they'd come up with all these crazy things, and then Mulaney would change one thing, would just like change one little detail right before without Bill Hader knowing. So the first time he sees it is when he's looking at the cue cards for it. And he'd like crack up almost all the time, and Mulaney did that just to make him laugh. And it's some of the best. Actually, John Mulaney just hosted, and there's a sketch that I've been showing everybody that I can tell. If you watch it, if you go on YouTube and look it up, it's called What's That Name? You can tell the part where Mulaney rewrote something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was watching that and I was so ecstatic because I saw in Bill Hader's eyes that was prepped.
Mike, did you happen to see that sketch?
No.
Okay, so the premise of the sketch is that all you have to, like, they show you somebody and you say what their name is. So Bill Hader came back when Mulaney hosted, and he was playing the host of the game show, and Mulaney was one of the contestants. And he goes, okay, so for $5, he's like, so name this person. He says John Legend is a star, but his wife is a star in her own right. Name that person. They show a picture, and he goes, Chrissy Teigen. And she goes, yeah, that's right, for $5. And then he asks the girl that's on, I don't know what that cast member's name is, because she's
Cecily Strong.
Okay, yeah, Cecily Strong. She's one of the newer ones, and I don't know all their names. But so he asks her a question, she answers it right. Then he goes back to Mulaney, and he says, okay, for $250,000. And then he brings out his friend Todd, and he's like, oh, hey, Todd, how's it going? And Todd's got his girlfriend. And she's like, yeah, hi, I've been his girlfriend for the past 4 years. What's my name? And he just kind of stares at her, and he doesn't know. So anyway, it goes on like that. But the part where you can tell John Mulaney wrote a new thing is they're talking back and forth, and he's like, I think you're a jerk, he says to the host. And Bill Hader goes, well, I think you're a jerk. And John Mulaney says, why don't you name all your friends' wives' name? And he goes, oh, those guys? They don't have wives. And then you can see him look at the cue card, and you can see him pause. And he goes, I run with a group of problem bachelors, and we call ourselves the Squad. And you can see that he wants to laugh so bad, but he does end up keeping it together. But knowing that Mulaney does that makes that sketch even funnier.
Yeah.
So the Stefan sketches for this era, I have seen a lot of those on YouTube or in reruns, and that's one of the big highlights for me, because I love John Mulaney's humor and I love Bill Hader's humor, and they go really well together. Do you have Nicholas? Do you have any specific sketches or anything from this era that you really loved?
Well, I really liked most of the ones from this era, but there was one, if I can re-find the words that I was just reading from. No, I cannot. Well, so all right, cool. there was. I really liked the update at this time, especially when Seth Meyers took over, and
Okay.
it was Meyers and Amy Poehler.
Yeah.
Really was really fun for me. But I can't think of any specific sketches at this moment.
Oh, that's cool.
There were a couple which I think are from this era, but it's kind of like this time frame, which when I wasn't really watching it that often, they kind of blend together. Seth Meyers did a sketch where he hosted a show called Pranksters with Christopher Walken. Was
Yes.
Yes.
Then he did another one that was the exact same thing, which was like the exact same joke, but the first one was really hilarious. That there was one where Seth Meyers and Amy Poehler played like these junior detectives. They were trying to solve a grisly murder of a substitute teacher.
I've
That was
never
pretty
seen
good, too.
that one, but that sounds
You should look that one up.
hilarious.
Because like she's like his bratty little sister. They talk about how they got there on their bikes and stuff, and like she was a whole. Like, he's like she was murdered.
Oh my god!
If you can find it, I should see that one again. It's a really solid sketch.
Well, prank you're my hero. Oh, that's the best. So then we move into the 2010 to 2015 era. And that is the, Fred Armisen, Abby Elliott, Bill Hader, Seth Meyers, Bobby Moynihan, Nassim Parad, Andy Samberg, Sudeikis, Kenan Thompson, Kristen Wiig. If you look at, I'm probably not as huge of a fan of all these people as a lot of people are, but they're big names in comedy. I mean, it's a big name cast. And then you have Vanessa Bayer, Paul Britton, Taron Killam comes on at this point. Kate McKinnon, who's in 2012, who's is a big star now too, and Jay Farrow. They all come on around this time. You get Tim Robinson too. Comes in towards the end of this era as well.
For a very short amount of time too.
Yeah.
Which was really sad, but I really liked Tim Robinson. I thought he was gonna be replacing because Bobby Moynihan had been on for a good amount of time, and Tim was set to kind of replace him, and then Tim left and Bobby stayed.
Oh, that's funny. But yeah, this so what now? Mike and I are not super familiar with this. Towards the very end of this era, obviously you get Michael Che, Pete Davidson, Leslie Jones, Colin Jost, a lot of the people that are the mainstays of the cast now. Yep. What, give us kind of a, an idea about this era of Saturday Night Live.
So at the beginning of this era, it was really Fred Armisen, Bill Hader, Seth Meyers, and Andy Samberg, who were like the top tier, I guess, of the show. And then Kristen Wiig came in, kind of swooping it, and she was in almost everything,
right, for
a solid amount of time. And then some changes were made where Bobby, Jay Farrow joined. And they were doing a lot more character work at a certain point, and not as much I guess original ideas. It was more like these people all do impressions. We're gonna really push on that more than we normally do.
Okay.
Yeah, Jay Farrow too was a solution to a very uncomfortable situation where Fred Armisen was playing Barack Obama.
Yes, absolutely.
As a callback to our earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
Fred Armisen, for the record, is not black enough to play Barack Obama.
Yes. Yeah, I'll definitely agree with that. Yeah, that's sort of that. I mean, it is sort of a, no pun intended, but it is sort of a black eye on the show that they didn't have the only black guy they had was Kenan Thompson, who couldn't do Barack Obama. So yeah, that was. Yeah, that was definitely an uncomfortable situation.
To his credit, though, he's not simply just like a token performer. He's a very talented impressionist. I don't know if you've heard a lot of this stuff,
absolutely.
But you're hearing him on different radio shows and stuff. I mean, I haven't heard his stand up. He's hilarious as far as impressions go.
The ones I've heard the most from him are Eddie Murphy and Barack Obama, and they're both spot on.
Yeah, Jay-Z, his Jay-Z is really good too.
Oh yeah, that's right. I have seen that. Yep.
Yeah, he's on the Hot Ones. I need to watch that episode.
Oh yeah, I should. I didn't. I wasn't aware he did one. Cause there's so many episodes I haven't seen yet. But yeah, I need to watch that one too. Oh, but did you notice a big change, towards the end of this season or the end of this era, when Michael Che and Pete Davidson and Colin Jost at this point they're still just featured players, but they kind of come in and Leslie Jones comes in. You think that injected sort of like new life into the cast?
Well, so right before that happened, they had so many new people coming on. Mm-hmm. It was honestly very, very shocking watching it. Like, I'm looking through the list of the cast and the features. Mm-hmm. There's at one point like 7 or 8 cast members, and then 7 or 8 feature members, which is absolutely wild to me.
Oh yeah, that's a big cast.
Yeah, but even with like the wild amount of people, there really wasn't that many people being shown, which is why the next season, so that was in the 2013-2014 season when all of those people came in. In the next season, they lost like half of those people because it was just so many people and not enough for getting any screen time at all. And then Cecily Strong, as Seth was leaving, Cecily was taking over as Weekend Update host.
Oh, I didn't know she did it. Yeah, see, I haven't watched a lot of this at all.
Yep. She was co-anchor for a few weeks, and then she was replaced by Jost.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I was aware that Jost and Chi do it together, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for a very, very short amount of time. And then that was also at the end of this section was when there was the entire thing about Zahir Zameda. Mm-hmm. Zahir Zameda? I don't know how to say her name, sorry. She was the only female black cast member.
Okay.
And so they did the whole sketch about there was Kerry Washington and her, and they were both playing as many black women characters as possible in one sketch. I think it was an opening, a cold open, but so many people were so mad about it that they, like, when they did that, someone else joined in that season. I think that was around the time that Leslie Jones joined in.
Yeah, probably.
Yep. Yes, it was. But yeah.
Why were they mad that they were playing? Because they were mad just at the idea of the sketch?
It was so there was a lot of like black women coming into like news stories and stuff, and so when they were doing like parodies on the news, there was only one person playing all of those roles.
Okay.
And she was very specifically the token black girl of the whole group.
Okay. So people were mad that there weren't more black women on the cast.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. The Saturday Night Live it's done better recently, but they've sort of had a problem with not having a lot of black representation, especially when you consider how many really good black comedians have been out there just doing different things. Then, I can't say that Lorne Michaels is racist or anything like that. I'm sure that's not the case. I don't know what is the cause of it, whether it's that not as many black people audition or what. I don't know, but it's definitely not a talent issue.
I imagine it's a bit of an echo chamber, like you'll have people hiring their friends, and then their friends, and maybe it's the fact that, the majority of the people were, white people, their friends, are probably a lot of white people as well, and that sort of things. I mean, but some of the African American like comedians on the show are just like forces of nature. Tracy Morgan, a force of nature. He's just like Chris Farley, but obviously not at the drug level as far as we know. Leslie Jones is also just like she's just someone who you're just compelled to watch whenever she's on there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Keenan
Thompson, selling factor.
Yeah, and Kenan Thompson is just very, very solid. I don't know if these sketches fall into this era, but he does a recurring sketch called Black Jeopardy. Oh my god, it's the funniest sketch I've ever seen.
It's so good.
It's a perfect sketch. He's a great host on it. The jokes are hilarious. They have these like mock ads that are just like perfectly, perfect for the sketch. It's a great sketch.
Yeah, after you told me about that, Mike, I went and watched some of the Black Jeopardy skits that are on YouTube, and you're right, they are hilarious.
Yeah, and he's great in them. Like the Tom Hanks one, especially.
The
so
Tom
good.
Hanks one is so good.
He's, it's so funny too because he's another guy. I think every era kind of needs their Phil Hartman, and I would say that Kenan Thompson is the Phil Hartman of this era, where it's a guy.
I think he might be the longest cast member, of all time. He or Horatio Sands, I think, was close.
It's Kenan, and then Daryl Hammond actually is the second.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and he's another one that you can just put anywhere. Like you can put Kenan Thompson, I think, has a little more where like he has established characters. So, he in a way like he's Phil Hartman, but also I guess Phil Hartman did too, because Phil Hartman had the Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer and the a couple of the other ones. But yeah, like he's that's the role that I see him in, is you can put Kenan Thompson in any sketch and he's going to be funny. He's going to help make any sketch that you put him in work.
Yeah, there's always like a journeyman on each era. He's certainly the most the current version of that.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I don't really ever see him in anything other than SNL. I don't see him in movies or like, TV shows. He just seems to be perfectly content with what he's doing.
He's actually, so not to like get away from SNL, but he is serving as executive producer of the reboot, talking about reboots again, the reboot of the All That TV show on Nickelodeon.
Okay, that makes sense. I know he was involved with Nickelodeon at a very young age. He's actually in the Mighty Ducks Part 2. That might be his first role.
Yeah.
He got his start on Nickelodeon on, I believe it was All That, or
the
one of those
Kenan
shows.
Kel,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm too old to know what he.
Yeah, that was after our time of watching Nickelodeon.
I would like to say for the record, though, that the knuckle puck is bullshit. If it really worked, professionals would be doing it constantly.
I agree. And that flying V, they'd be offsides all the time.
Yeah.
What's funny is I think the professional team, the Mighty Ducks, have actually done that on occasion, just as reference to the movie.
Oh my god. But anyway, so we go into the last era of Saturday Night Live, which is 2015 till now. Colin Jost and Michael Che, I believe, are still head writers. Yeah. There's some that kind of go back and forth. This era is a little bit influenced by a online channel that I watch sometimes called College Humor. Because they get a few of their writers, including
Streeter Seidel is one of the big ones.
Yep, Streeter Seidel comes over at this point. So does why can't I remember her name? She was on College Humor a lot too, and I liked her. Sarah Schneider, I think that's her name.
Yep.
So Sarah Schneider comes over, and she's a big part of the writing team at this point too. So they inject a little bit more youth online kind of mentality into the show during this era. This is like I said, Michael Che and Pete Davidson, Leslie Jones, Colin Jost, Vanessa Bayer, Kate McKinnon, who I like. This is Taran Killam too. What I know about this era mostly is Kate McKinnon doing a lot of crazy stuff. Taran Killam and the Colin Jost and Michael Che. and Leslie Jones. Leslie Jones just like killing it basically, and that gets us to today with some people I have never heard of in my life, but Chris Redd, Ego Ndoyem, Heidi Gardner, Melissa. I have a weird last name. It looks like. Oh wait, maybe it's Spanish. For a second, it looked almost like Yeah, I thought it was Scandinavian for a second, Mike. I was going to get mad. But
it's Villasenor.
Keaton Thompson, Cicely Strong, Kyle Mooney, who I do kind of recognize, Alex Moffat.
Yeah, Kyle Mooney was on Norm Macdonald's sports show.
That's why I recognize him.
Yep.
He was his nephew, I think, his nephew.
The great Pete Davidson, who was engaged to
Ariana Grande.
Yeah, I was going to say some singer. Yeah. And then they broke up, and then she wrote a song about it, and then he tweeted out that he might be suicidal, and then he was okay, and the last I looked, I think it was today or yesterday, he was making out with an actress at a basketball game.
Yeah.
Do you find Pete Davidson funny, Nick?
So, okay.
That sounds like a no. It sounds like a qualified no.
Maybe it's just
Remember
me,
that he might be listening and he could be suicidal.
He's a great dude. Like he's funny in most circumstances. The worst thing about him though is as much as everyone gives like Fallon and Sands flack for breaking all the time, I have seen maybe 2 sketches that Pete Davidson has been in that he has not broken on camera. And I can only assume what he's doing off camera.
Yeah, I personally I just don't get it. I guess I don't find him especially funny. Maybe it's just a generational thing. I'm just perplexed. Is what it is. If you're listening, Pete, sorry, I don't.
I assume that he likes to laugh a lot because
yes.
I know he laughs a lot about his dad dying in the World Trade Center.
Yes, yeah.
I've heard him talk
his
about
father,
that.
The fireman.
I've heard him make a lot of jokes about that.
But wasn't he like a cast member, like age 20 or something? Which I mean, yeah. I just don't see these like, oh my god, we got to get this guy.
I think they were definitely going for a younger person because everyone at that before Pete Davidson was on the show, everyone was 27 and older. And it wasn't appealing to my demographic.
Okay,
gotcha.
Anymore,
but he doesn't appeal to you. You say?
Well, he doesn't appeal to me. I'm sure he appeals to those kids who listen to the trap rap music and all that fun stuff.
I don't even know what that is. I feel so old. It's like there was a Family Guy, part or whatever segment one time, flashback or whatever the hell you want to call it, where they were.
That one.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was like, hey, it's the Kids' Choice Awards on Nickelodeon or whatever network has it on. And it's with stars that I don't know, Hannah Montana. They name a couple big ones that you might have heard of. And then they start just making up names. And that's how I feel now when we talk about, younger performers and stuff like that. I don't know, Mike knows, you have a couple kids and you just get trapped, and you don't pay attention to things that are going on outside as much as you used to, and just all of a sudden it's like I'm reading the list of these cast members and I'm like, is that even Ego Nwodim? Is that a name, or is that a disease that is that a tapeworm breed that might be in your stomach? It's just I don't know any of these people.
Yeah. Well, so very fun thing for her is that she was specifically hired as a black woman actress because
that's a girl.
The show
Ego's a girl's name.
That is a girl. Yeah.
Well, how do you say her name? Ego. I like the NWO.
Ego Nwodim.
Nwodim. Okay.
I think.
Okay.
I think the N is half silent.
Okay.
Nwodim.
Ego.
Mark, explain to the folks at home who Ego Nwodim is.
So she is. When I saw her in the opening title, like cards, like in the featured players, I thought it was this year's Zameda because she looks exactly like her and she acts exactly like her. But the Sheer wasn't in last season because she got. I think she retired herself. I don't think she got fired along with all of the other guys that did get fired. Like I think it was Jay Farrow and Taryn Killam got fired.
Oh wow, Jay Farrow got fired?
Yes. Yep.
Oh wow. Her name is short for Ego Bumma. Yeah, I don't understand. But she, I know that she went to Eastern Technical High School in Essex, Maryland.
Nice.
Wikipedia told me that.
I'm
She can fix your two-stroke motors if you need it done.
Oh, she had a 3-episode arc on Two Broke Girls.
Oh wow.
Apparently. So, if that tells you anything you want to know about her comedy jobs. No, I'm sure she's fine. I've never heard of her, but I'm sure she's fine. But I mean, there are other people that have normal names that I've never heard of either, like Heidi Gardner or Chris Red.
Heidi Gardner has taken over as this section of SNL has been extremely female heavy.
Okay,
like a lot of their skits do not have men in them. Because they're mainly like Kate McKinnon, Cecily Strong, and A.D. Bryant. Mm-hmm. And then Beck Bennett and Kyle Mooney have really been jumping in. And then Mikey Day and Alex Moffat also, in the last year and a half, 2 years, they've been really like full force on them. But Heidi Gardner, even though she's only a featured player and has been on the show for less than a year, she's been in every single episode for multiple times in each episode, which is crazy when you see that like someone like Melissa Villaseñor doesn't get barely any screen time, and she's an amazing actress. I'm not saying Heidi Gardner isn't either; she's phenomenal. But Melissa Villaseñor, she does impressions extremely well. Like they just had on maybe this last one or the one 2 weeks ago, she did on the Weekend Update a joke about her Lady Gaga impression, which was amazing and almost entirely perfect. But that got a whole bunch of flack from viewers of SNL because that was the same episode as the Black History Month episode.
Okay.
And those two things really got people up in arms because, first of all, the Black History Month skit where Alex and Kyle take over because they're two white guys talking about, like, they interrupt the black cast members and talk about, like, all the famous black people that have been in entertainment and made achievements. And they did that for Women's Month last year. So there is like a
precedent
for it, but people were up in arms about that, and then followed it up by the Weekend Update addressing the fact that some people who are amazing at doing characters or doing specific people in impressions of people aren't getting any screen time, but other people are. And yeah, it was. That episode of SNL is the one that I've heard talked about in the most anger in a while.
Now, Melissa Villaseñor, her last name translates to houseboy, basically. I guess.
Homeboy.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
is it a real name? Is it like a stage name?
No, that's her actual name.
That's
just a weird
name.
Coincidence then.
Yeah. But yeah. So now, would you say that this era of Saturday Night Live is as popular with young people as it used to be? Is the show losing its popularity? What do you think?
So I think that it has been losing popularity in the last few years. I especially think that so it's Saturday Night Live. Like that's its thing, is it's live. But a lot of the time there's so many digital sketches. In just this last week there was 2 or 3 out of the 12, or not 12, Jesus. Out of like 8 or 9 that they did, there was 2 or 3 that were digital. And then almost every episode there's like a musical section, which is typically fine if it's spaced out, but if it's every episode, it gets to be kind of just like too much for what the show is supposed to be, I guess, because those are also digital, and it's just so forced.
What's interesting is Lorne Michaels insists that it's not a comedy show; it's more of a variety show, which for some areas it really shows. I mean, like the very first episode, I think Andy Kaufman was on there and doing his, interesting form of comedy. Penn and Teller were regular guests at some points. They would just straight up have like George Carlin on there doing stand-up segments.
Yeah,
it does sound like there's. I mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean, because today, just the way I can't tell you the last time I watched a TV show like regularly. I only watch like YouTube. I'll watch stuff on demand. I'll watch streaming services, but I could not tell you the last time I was really into a TV show that was only available to be watched on TV. So it only makes sense that they'd be, going to like a short, like attention span type, soundbite era of comedy.
Yeah, that's the thing is like Saturday Night Live. Who watches things live anymore?
Yeah,
I mean, it's so much easier to watch it at your convenience.
Yeah, that used to be a thing, but it's definitely like that used to be the only way to watch stuff. But it's certainly not necessarily them performing it live, but watching it when it aired used to be the only way to watch stuff. But now it's, I don't know, it's definitely changed.
They just show it to whenever's convenient for you.
Yeah.
What do you two think is going to happen as far as the future goes? I mean, do you think this show can survive like the change in media to being a more digital platform?
I think there will always be, I don't know. I mean, I could see it getting to 50 seasons to do about 6 more seasons and them calling it quits. I don't know what happens when Lorne Michaels decides to retire. I mean, obviously in the very early part, like we talked about, in 1980 to 85, somebody else took over the show. The show obviously suffered and probably would have disintegrated if not for Eddie Murphy. I think the show dies with Lorne Michaels. That's my guess, is that he holds on for 6 more years. They get to 50 years. He decides that he's had enough of it. And I think they probably go away.
Eddie Murphy closes the last episode by doing a stand-up routine. That'd be perfect.
That would be awesome. But yeah, I think
that would be good.
That's my guess, is they get to 50 seasons and then they're done.
I mean, that would be great. I mean, to end it, at that point, because it'll eventually peter out one way or the other.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in a lot of ways it's a relic. I mean, sure, there's like a huge institution of SNL, which is really it has a lot more credit than it's due. I mean, I feel that if you took every sketch that I personally would find funny and put them all in order, you'd probably have 2 seasons, if that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more hit or miss, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think most of the I mean, I can remember when I used to actually watch it live. I can remember, long stretches of just kind of sitting there and being like, not laughing at all. And then, something would come on towards the late night, because that's when they would put on stuff that was probably more to your and my liking, Mike.
Yeah, I'd always wait till the Norm Macdonald section, and often like in the last half hour they'd have some really like risky as far as comedy goes, not necessarily like lewd or anything like that. They just have like these bizarre sketches like, oh, you're still around? Hey, try.
Yeah, I think that's when they had the Colonel Angus sketch, also with Christopher Walken. I think that's when they did Will Ferrell as Robert Goulet, talking about his new album where he does the rap albums.
Coconut Baker's Ball. It's a rap.
Would you call a clown to fix a leak in a John? So why are you letting these hooligans tear down the biz?
Yeah, that was something you could not play today.
Oh no. I mean, he used the N word very liberally because
He doesn't use it; he emphasizes it.
Oh yeah, because he's singing the songs. You know, like the biggest hits from Puffy, Biggie. How about this one from Cisco? Girl, that dress is so scandalous. I won't sing the second part, but
Yeah, you probably should.
but yeah, like they would bury a lot of those towards the end when they were like, okay, all the kids are in bed or whatever. But yeah, there's definitely more miss than hits.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the nature of a show like this, where you have a bunch of different people with different comedic sensibilities writing a bunch of different sketches, and the only way you really test them is once before an audience, like an audience before they start taping, and you decide what's going to stay and what's going to get cut and everything. And It's just, there's too many sketches on each show to have the funny sketches for each segment. It's just no one can write that many funny things.
Right, and then again, this is a show that's been pronounced dead like many, many times. I mean, it's been pronounced, every 5, years or so, you'll see an article, is SNL dead? And then you're like, oh, wait, no, look, it's not. Here's Dana Carvey. Oh, no, sorry, Chris Farley's on now. Oh, have you heard of Long Island? Oh, look, here's Kate McKinnon. It's just, they're just like a feeder, for like movies and stand-up careers and TV shows. I mean, it's really like almost like a badge of like, honor to be associated with the show in any like tangential way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You'll always be an SNL cast member wherever you go.
I think that they could probably keep going as long as they found more talented people, which I think they'll always be able to. The show will go into lulls like it's always done, but as long as they continue to find those talented performers, I think it could go on virtually forever. I just feel like once Lorne Michaels decides to retire, that it's probably over. But I mean, I could be wrong, because the show's not expensive. That's the other big thing about it, is the reason everybody leaves and goes to movies and things like that is because the show doesn't pay great. I mean, for a performer just starting out and everything, obviously they get paid a good salary. But when you compare it to big hit network shows, like
the neighbor on the worst sitcom is making more than the best cast member of SNL.
Exactly, because if you're a recurrent character on a sitcom on a major television network, then you're getting like $50,000-$75,000 an episode, something like that. And the big ones get the big cast members on the biggest shows get $1 million an episode, and no one on Saturday Night Live is touching $1 million an episode. So it's cheap for the network, which is part of why it continues to stay on the air.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And plus, they've probably had the studio forever. They have every type of costuming or set design. I mean, if you want to do a game show, they've done 1,000 game shows, so you can make up a new game show set, and like no one's been.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the things that it has in its advantage. I just don't know who takes over to shepherd the show after Lorne Michaels leaves. Now, there are old cast
My guess would be
members.
Marcy Klein.
Yeah. And there are some old cast members that could too, I could see different people coming in, but yeah, it's one of those things where I don't know. I could see them going to 50 and stopping. I could see them going on forever. It's like The Simpsons. You know what I mean? Like when does The Simpsons finally stop?
That's
not soon enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is our show for the week. Long one. I might have to edit some stuff out because we have gone for a while. But yeah, that is our show for the week. You can find Nicholas at How Will I Die podcast on Twitter. You're How Will I Die or HWID Pod, correct?
HWIDIEPOD.
Okay, there you go. HWIDIEPOD. at that on Twitter and Facebook. And do you have an email you want listeners to write into you?
You can check out. I have a website-ish on Tumblr, which is sad, but if you want to submit like an idea or there's a submission box on there.
You can go to our GeoCities website too.
When does your podcast come out, Nick?
Right this very second, I am on an every other Thursday release, but soon moving to every Thursday.
Sounds
All right.
good.
So that's the same day our show comes out. So right after you listen to our show, listen to How Will I Die podcast, or listen to that first, but make sure that you come over here too.
Yes, definitely.
So you can find us at Massive Late Fee on Twitter, Massive Late Fee every place, Massive Late Fee Facebook, Massive Late Fee Gmail. Mike, I thought you were joking this entire time, but I actually went to MySpace and looked up MySpace/Massive Late Fee. We have a MySpace.
Yep.
I thought it was a joke,
That's
but
wild.
Mike actually did go
it's
out
not
and
a
make a MySpace account. So
It's been there for a while, still though, friends.
if you want to come over to MySpace for some reason, then
We're starting a trend.
you can friend us over there. Mike, you got me so good. You wouldn't believe the shock on my face when I looked it up and saw that you'd actually made it. Oh.
It wasn't taken, so
Oh my god. So you can find us there. And we want to thank Nicholas Howe for being our guest tonight. Maybe we'll be over on your show at some point if you'll have us.
Absolutely.
But you check him out. And as always, tell a friend about How Will I Die podcast. Tell a friend about Massive Late Fee. Tell a friend about our network, and go to at MSC Network on Twitter, and you can check out all the shows there. Have a good week, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
later.